Snowy Day meeting. I think half of us were on the phone.
Give approval on minutes, first February.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we have some additional materials in the meeting packet. I just thought that it was useful to kind of keep in mind the governor's priorities and requests. So I asked for them to put that in there as a reminder to us as we go through some of these topics. We did that previously, and I just thought it was always really useful, so it's in there. And let's see, so I think next we're going to do liaison updates. We have the digest in here. I'll go first, the Healthcare Workforce Committee. The only thing I would add to the digest is the Healthcare Workforce Committee has been working on updating their charter. And once that is done, it'll be brought back to the board for approval. But otherwise, let's get a digest. I think does a good job summarizing it. John, did you have anything with the metrics and scoring?
I think both groups are working along, getting ready for the next round of decisions, having input into the equity piece. So, nothing beyond that.
Okay. And Rosinda yesterday went to the Health Equity Committee retreat.
Okay, thank you. I noticed that in the agenda, the Health Equity Committee has a draft. In there they had talked about what they were planning on doing at the retreat. And it lasted most of the day yesterday. And the retreat objectives when I arrived there were to deepen and strengthen relationships among ECHA members and the OHA staff, to clarify and differentiate roles of the members, OHA staff, and other OHA divisions and groups, and to review committees from 2018 retreat and progress made to date commitments, and address equity work group structures and expectations, consider work group goals and objectives, and develop 1 to 2 year plans. They also talked about updating the charter, looking at and developing relationships and finding out how other groups were talking about or ethics that they wanted to do that. It was a good session, and we'll probably be getting the notes back. They did have some questions for the OHTV, and I have them here. Maybe take a copy at home and stuff.
Okay. Anybody else? So we've been working on getting liaisons assigned. Rosinda is the primary for the Health Equity Committee, and Zeke is going to be secondary. Kirsten is doing High Talk, and Brenda is secondary for Healthcare Workforce Committee, and we're still having conversations with Oscar. Anybody else wants to add on that topic? Jeremy? Okay, we actually.
Yeah. Well, I was hopeful for a second till Jeff said that David would be able to make it, that we maybe would have it the first time everybody here in person. I'm not sure things like that either. Yeah, let me give a quick update. Pat wasn't able to be here. Our Ways and Means presentations are starting. Budget presentations are starting today. So today's the kind of kickoff for the overall agency. It's a couple of weeks. They spend the Ways and Means Human Services Subcommittee spent most of February on DHS, and they'll spend a good chunk of March on Oregon Health Authority. So Pat's doing kind of agency overview today. I'll be up tomorrow with the Health Policy Analytics Division budget. OHP is up the day after, and then we just continue on and make our way through the agency over the next couple of weeks. We're in the thick now of the legislative session. We're over a month in, and so we're starting to see kind of the landscape there. Things are moving along. Most notably, last week the legislature passed House Bill 2010, which was the first half of the governor's Medicaid budget package. It included an extension of the hospital tax, extension of the insurer tax, extension of the reinsurance program to help stabilize things in the individual market. The two other components of that, the governor's package, which included an increase in tobacco tax and an employer participation program, those are still sort of in the drafting phase, and we're quite ready to go in terms of being drafted and ready to go. So those will be coming up next in the process. The letters of intent, let me give you a quick update on that, and I guess before I do that, just so folks know, in your packet you have an update that we put together on the contracting process, including an overall timeline. So just so you kind of have some of those key milestones in your head, the last milestone was updates to letters of intent. Basically, the original letters were due February 1st. There was, in essence, a 10 or 14-day period where any proposer could go in and make changes to the letter of intent. And so we had initially we had 24 letters received, 11 were amended. A couple of folks pulled back, so most notably in the Tri-County area, initially a lot of the original health share partners and a few others had put in their own original letters of intent, but put out a press release saying we're sort of doing that if we don't come together under a single health share letter of intent. So those organizations ended up pulling back their individuals and just left the health share letter of intent in. Trillium, CCO down in Lane County, was the only one that I can think of that actually in their revised letter expanded their territory. So they proposed expanding down into the South Coast as well as up through the I-5 corridor into Marion and Polk counties and in the Tri-County area. There were Providence had originally proposed. Let's see here. They had an additional county out in Eastern Oregon that they pulled back from. I think that was a Pacific Source, and there were a few organizations that made some kind of technical changes in their LOIs to adjust things like their business registration number in there. But all told, all parts of the state still covered with the letters of intent. A good chunk of the state, there would be, at least based on letters of intent, which aren't, doesn't necessarily mean that's where applications will fall, but based on letters of intent, there would be multiple choices in good parts of the state. Next step really is the application process. So applicants have, I think, probably have their head down and are working on getting their actual applications together, which are due April 22nd. Just because somebody put it in an OI doesn't mean they necessarily will ultimately put in the application. But we're working through kind of the formal question and answer process with applicants and things of that nature between now and April 22nd. So next big update will be pre-rolls once applications are in after the 2nd of April.
Jeremy, would it be possible to get like a kind of a visual map of where folks are at, interest areas, and where they're from?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we put that together. I don't know that we've published it yet, but I don't see a reason why we couldn't try to get something like that online and out to you.
So if you can't answer this, I understand. So when you have an organization that's requesting an area and the contract is awarded, is it awarded to the area that they're asking for, or is there flexibility to say, this is the area we want you to serve, we're not going to award to these other areas? How much flexibility is there in the contracting process related to that?
Well, I would say just because somebody's proposed a certain area doesn't mean it's a guarantee that that's ultimately what they're going to end up with. So I mean, we've still got to go through the evaluation process, evaluate the organization in terms of things like financial solvency and ability to take membership, and also think about things like, is there enough membership in a particular area to support the number of applicants? So, we'll be evaluating all the applicants, basically on the same evaluation criteria, but some of those things we still have to work through in the evaluation process.
You answered my second question to that. Any other questions? All right, we're just speeding along here. Is Kate here? Okay. Great, okay. Sorry, we're early.
Right?
Yes.
All right.
So while they're just getting settled, why don't I just give a, that'd be great, quick update on kind of how things have been evolving. So at the January retreat, the board's, landed on 3 priorities, cost containment, children's health, and health equity. We've had a number of kind of follow-up conversations with you all, both in the February board meeting as well as offline. I think where we've got some good feedback on the board's direction in terms of equity, as well as the cost work, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later in terms of the legislation that's coming in. Today, I think it's really an opportunity to get some feedback from you all in terms of children's health, but ultimately where we proposed trying to handle these 3 areas to work on some work plans for you all to look out over the next probably more like 18 to 24 months, just given how meaty these topics are. Not to say that there won't be milestones sort of throughout the year, but I think we probably all agree we're not going to solve all children's health issues in 10 months. So I think we're thinking about there's probably a lot of work that can be built into a kind of longer trajectory. So what we're hoping to do is get feedback from you on the children's health piece and then bring back work plans in May. We'll be out of area in April. It gives us a little bit of time to organize ourselves internally and then bring back some proposed work plans in May for each of those 3 areas. In the meantime, we've started to organize ourselves internally, similar to how we did around CCO 2.0, around some internal teams in each of those 3 areas to start to bring together different parts of the organization. Those will be the teams that we'll be working on proposed work plans for you all in each of those 3 areas. So just wanted to kind of give you a quick update, interested if there's any feedback on that kind of strategy or timing. And again, that's isn't to say we're really pushing work off into the next year, but just more thinking about, building a calendar and work plan that's looking out over a longer horizon.
Jeremy, do you envision creating an annual calendar for the policy board like we've had in the past?
Exactly. We've got one right now, but I think the idea would be update that, kind of look out over a broader horizon and think about how we, think about even as other committees are bringing in their regular reports, really making sure that we're kind of tying it back to the board's 3 priorities.
Yeah, and what I find really valuable about that structure is that it kind of puts our future needs into, we're going to tackle that next quarter instead of just wondering, are we tracking the program? So I really appreciate that. Rolling 18 months or something.
And the 3 are children?
Cost and equity.
Are you going to talk about 889 later? Or?
Yep, we've got that on the agenda after this.
Take it away.
Great, good morning. It's wonderful to be with you. I'm Dana Hernani, Chief Health Officer for the Women's Health Authority.
Good morning, I'm Keith Jacobs, I'm the maternal and child health manager here in the Public Health Division.
So as Jeremy mentioned, we're just kind of doing a primer, if you will, on some of the kind of leading strategies we're targeting around children's health that OHA is involved in, to give you a sense of that, really to help give, I think, the deeper dive with you all in the future. So first, we just wanted to highlight a little bit about the Health Policy Board's work and leadership in the area of children's health. These are just a couple points in time just to highlight it, especially for those of you who might be new to the board. So starting back in 2012, of course, that was soon after building out CCO 1.0, and at the same time, the state passed legislation that was still the Early Learning Council stood up a set of early learning hubs across the state, and the Health Policy Board was really engaged in providing input and support during the development of those hubs. Shortly thereafter, the Health Policy Board and the Early Learning Council formed a joint subcommittee. That joint subcommittee kicked off in December 2012, really focused on identifying opportunities for alignment and strategies to drive shared improvements around goals related to kindergarten readiness that really cross over health and early learning, and met over a series of years to articulate what those opportunities could be as both systems were building out their new transformation efforts. As part of that, they really identified, you all really identified the critical role that quality measurement and accountability play in both systems, and pulled together a work group over about a year called the Child and Family Wellbeing Measures Work Group that pulled together ideas and opportunities for aligned measurement to drive our shared goals again. That provided a foundation for work that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. In 2016, the Health Policy Board specifically supported Senate Bill 5507, which established core competencies for the early learning, the home visiting workforce across early learning and the health system. And then most recently, as you know, we really provided strong leadership to prioritize children's health throughout the CCO 2.0 policy development arena. So you've had a long history in prioritizing children's health, and I'm excited that you've identified this as a priority for your work in the next 1 to 2 years.
All right, so as Jeremy and Dana teed up, we are excited to share with you a couple of innovations in children's health that we're looking forward to as we're moving into this priority and sort of a new day that I'm kind of seeing after having been here 11 years of really not only prioritizing children's health, but moving to the next level. And so what we would like for you to help us with is to consider, as you're thinking and hearing about these innovations, what would the Health Policy Board benefit from a deeper dive in? I think lots of these will require a deeper dive because we're just going to be touching the surface. What role can the Policy Board play? Is it a public support? Is it guidance? Is it building partnerships? What role would the Policy Board like to have? And how does this work align with our other topic areas? So we're looking forward to your thoughts.
So these are the 5 areas we're just going to do a light touch on, just to give you a sense. And again, glad to come back as we develop how those work plans to do deeper dives in all of these. So I think instead of walking through this list with you, we're just going to dive into the first one, if you will. So in 2018, Oregon's Metrics and Scoring Committee sponsored this new work group, which is called the Health Aspects of Kindergarten Readiness Technical Work Group. And it really ultimately to develop CCO incentive measures that drive kindergarten readiness. This was what I mentioned as building off the foundational work that was done prior a couple of years ago around child and family well-being measurement work. OHA supported this effort of this work group that concluded with a report in November in deep partnership with important people. We wanted to call out. The Children's Institute was really strong in leading the effort to kind of galvanize this work. Also supported by the Oregon Pediatric Improvement Partnership at OHSU and Diana Bianco of our consult team. The work group's charge was to recommend 1 or more health system quality measures that drive health system behavior change, quality improvement, or investments that can drive improvements in kindergarten readiness. Also the focus, what was really focused on measurement in the health system, it was intended to catalyze cross-sector efforts that are really required to address such a large population health goal around kindergarten readiness. Again, the group concluded its work in November with a final report and did a couple of really important things through the course of their work. They created a conceptual framework that outlines the key components of the health sector in driving improvements in early childhood and kindergarten readiness, and then identified a whole suite of metrics that can be used to measure how successful we are in the health system to do so. The work group ultimately, as part of its final recommendations, recommended a multi-year measurement strategy that could be used to incentivize CCO behavior change that I articulated. And this measure concept was endorsed by both the Metrics and Scoring Committee and the Health and Quality Metrics Committee over the last couple of months. 2 of the measures will be considered by the Metrics and Scoring Committee here in the near future for potential inclusion in their 2020 incentive measure set. And 2 other measures require further development, and that work is just kicking off and underway. Again, we can dive in much deeper about what those measures look like. And ultimately, there's a tremendous amount of national attention on this work. This is really cutting edge work that Oregon is doing. There's a number of key states that are focused on these type of measures within the health system that are really looking and partnering with Oregon to see how we can advance this. And I think a lot of the work we're doing has strong applicability across our state as well as the nation. So changing, that was your quick primer on measurement around kindergarten readiness. The next area I wanted to talk to you about is some other cutting edge and innovative work we're doing focused on children with health complexity. So this is a systems level approach to identifying children with health complexity and targeting and addressing their needs. So let me try to address this a little bit. Over the past 1.5 years, we've been doing this work. It's really been led by the leadership of the Oregon Pediatric Improvement Partnership and funded through the Lucille Packard Foundation. In partnership has been a strong partner, our Oregon Health Authority analytics team, and as well our DHS partners who oversee the Oregon Enterprise data analytics hasn't really been done by any other states to pull off this type of data. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is to create and operationalize a construct around children's health complexity. We're ultimately trying to identify children in the Medicaid population who have both high medical complexity and or high social complexity, and combining those two aspects to thinking about broadly and holistically what do children need and their families to improve their health outcomes. This data ultimately that we're doing, this data that we're collecting and creating is really intended to be actionable. We're collecting this data, providing it to CCOs for their population. We're also providing additional reports at the state level as well as the county level to help drive partnerships and think about how to best target and address the complex needs that children and families are facing. Ultimately, we are also providing technical assistance to CCOs to help them operationalize this data within the work that they're doing and engage with their community partners and frontline stakeholders to address this. We are currently the Oregon Health Authority Transformation Center as supporting the Oregon Pediatric Improvement Partnership to do some of the technical assistance with our CCOs. So let's talk a little bit more what I mean by children's health complexity. And we'll just do a quick overview. And there's a lot of really, I think, important data in this work that we'd like to come back and talk to you in the future. So this is supposed to be helpful to see the construct we're talking about. Again, this combination of data hasn't been done by others or by other states. So we're looking at children from 0 to 18, and we're using our Medicaid claims data to better understand their medical complexity to start. We're using an algorithm that was created in Washington, validated through research and further work, and we're able to get a better sense of the complexity of children within our state in the OHP. We're then looking at systems level data that can identify social factors that are affecting these families, both either at a child family or at a child level or at a family level. We're looking at specific social factors that were shown through research at Washington to impact specifically health outcomes for children, but as well as drive increased costs in the health system specifically. And we worked with DHS partners to identify what data we have available at the system level to help bring that down to that child level. Ultimately, we have combined the medical complexity with the social complexity to get a broad look at children's health complexity. Historically, most of the work we do in the health system is looked primarily at medical complexity for kids. We know through the social determinants of health research and the adverse childhood experiences that children's health is highly impacted by those social determinants of health. And this is a way we've been able to explicitly operationalize that for our Medicaid populations and CCOs to help really start identifying best tools and practices to address that complexity. So finally, I think I talked a little bit already, so we're trying to look at the unique needs of our populations, and if we have the opportunity to bring this back to you, one of the things that won't be surprising to you is the data that shows the significant disparities that exist across our state, and will allow us to think through with our partners specifically how do we identify trauma-informed and culturally responsive services can specifically target some of these impacts and be really sensitive to avoid the unintentional impacts of those, the data and how we use it. I'll just say this is really new. We are just at the beginning of this work and have a lot to do to grow it and to identify how we best can use it to benefit children and families in Oregon.
I would just say, I mean, it's probably an hour and a half conversation of work that Dana and on this. So we just kind of wanted to give you a teaser, see if this is something you'd be interested in a longer conversation on. But we've been talking internally, this is something that could be actually kind of a whole frame for how the policy board thinks about its work in this area.
It is very exciting, truly exciting. All right, shifting gears a little bit to something that you might be a little more familiar with, perhaps, the State Health Improvement Plan. In public health, every 5 years, we do a reset on the State Health Improvement Plan, also known as the SHIP. The Policy Board's action plan is refreshed based on some of the work that was done in the 15 to 19 SHIP, and we are actually in the final year of those priorities. And so the exciting work that's happening now, been happening, is what the process that we're going through in terms of resetting those priorities for the next 5-year cycle. So we started off with the state health assessment, and I will say this is a teaser because the public health leadership is very excited to bring the details to you. So I'm just going to skip on here and hopefully whet your appetite for more. We have completed the state health assessment, which is the first part of this process. And then we moved into some community feedback sessions. And we took that quantitative information from the assessment and then brought it to different communities and said, how is this resonating within these communities? And we got a lot of feedback from a variety of different types of communities, both geographical, but also in terms of race and ethnicity, and communities, organizations that are working with the diverse population that we have. Because we know that we really want to start addressing the health equity issues as well as moving towards social determinants of health. And so, as a teaser, after all that work was done, the prioritization process happened, and these are the 5 priorities that will be driving the ship, as they say, in the next 5 years. So I think we'll see lots of commonalities between what was happening with CCO 2.0, the governor's agenda, addressing institutional bias, adversity, trauma, and toxic stress, economic drivers of health, so housing, living wages, food security, transportation, all of those drivers, access to equitable and preventive health care, and behavioral health. And so I think these are pretty familiar themes in terms of knowing that, or seeing how they address children's health. So for example, with diversity, we're looking at how do we address and try to move forward our work on prevention of cases of adverse health effects. And again, just to show how it aligns clearly with the governor's children's agenda, which you're probably familiar with. Her 8 priorities touch on a lot of these, so homelessness, ending homelessness for children, and greater housing stability for families, 100% health care coverage, substance use disorder, and behavioral health prevention, or behavioral health, affordable child care, which maybe isn't quite as directly here, seen here, but certainly we know that's an economic driver for families. Parents getting better jobs, so that's ensuring inclusive prosperity, and the impact that climate can have on families and children's health. So we're pretty excited about presenting this to you in more depth, as well as all the details with the different communities that we're going to engage with.
I'm just very briefly going to touch on value-based payments in children's health as a tool to continue to drive improvements in this population's outcomes. So you spent a lot of time discussing value-based payments as part of your CCO 2.0 policy development. And again, just to remind you, the goal of VBP and the work that you've done is to incentivize our delivery system reform to really focus on value instead of volume of care delivered. And so as part of CCO 2.0, we VBP growth targets that will be established to achieve the 70% VBP goal by 2024. And so we just wanted to highlight as a reminder that for years 2 through 5, CCOs are required to implement new value-based payments in 5 focused care delivery areas. 2 of them are explicitly focused on children. So one, maternal child health focus around maternity care delivery, and then by 2022 will be required, and then by 2024 there will be requirements around VBP for children's health specifically. The other 3 areas of those 5 include hospital care, behavioral health, and oral care, and of course all of those have an opportunity to specifically target improvements in children's health as well. Thinking about value-based payment in the context of children's health is quite different than adults. The value is different. For adults, a lot of the VBP methodology has been focused on really immediate high-cost reduction, and of course the value here in children is really looking at the longer term, as well as some short-term opportunities, particularly for complex care kids. So again, this is an area that is really leading the edge around improving children's health outcomes. And finally, we wanted to let you know, if you weren't aware already, that OHA is seeking to develop an Office of Children's Health. We have a tremendous amount of expertise already in our agency to support a lot of key areas of focus, but we see further opportunity ahead, and just wanted to call that out for you. So this, some funding to support this effort is included in the governor's proposed budget, and of course we'll move forward this legislative process. Really, I think why I hope and expect why we're all talking about this is an effort to do a priority for our state and for the Health Policy Board. It's just really understanding, again, that this lifelong health, long-term outcomes really start in early childhood. We know that significant brain development happens early on that impacts overall health, wellness, economic development, prosperity, and beyond. Also impacts to equity and intergenerational impacts of equity. So we see the opportunity for an Office of Child Health to really deploy innovative and cutting-edge opportunities and strategies that can further our impact in the state around children's health. We see a lot of the efforts we've described here that to be able to utilize the effort of Office of Children's Health that's focused on including additional capacity around equity, additional capacity around health analytics and policy, for example, to really drive these cutting-edge strategies. We also see this office as a really hub for our cross-sector work that are really needed to drive these big system-level changes. We see it also as a hub for working with the Children's Cabinet, ongoing work with the Early Learning Council and their strategic plan, as well as other partners. So we wanted to outline here some of the vision we have for this, and of course, are glad to hear your other thoughts on how this office continues moving forward.
All right, so that's what we had to share with you this morning, and we are interested in hearing from you all what you have to say about this. Thoughts, initial reactions?
So your audience sounds like children, not Medicaid children, all children, right?
Yes, I mean, it's, what we do for the Medicaid population also drives what happens in the non-Medicaid population. And certainly in public health, we're looking at that whole population.
So for me, I mean, what intrigues me here, and the issue I'll bring up later, is political capital. I think you have political capital that perhaps doesn't exist in the adult world. And you are closer, you're talking about an audience and population that's closer to universal coverage. So, figuring out how to use that political capital, I think, will be interesting. And for myself, I think as we move along, my thoughts will always be, if there's an equity approach that's right, why don't we ask the children folks to do it first? For example, as you spoke, I thought, it sounds like for the population of complex children, we should have excellent information about race and ethnicity. It's not asking too much to make sure that every one of those children has accurate race and ethnicity information. And so an evaluation can be done of whether they're being treated equitably. And since your audience is larger than that, that could be challenging for that population. As we talk about cost, and one of the problems in cost is going to be self-insured employers. And getting any information from self-insured employers. It would be an interesting strategy to see whether there's the political capital to get information from self-insured employers about the children that they cover and how well do they cover them and what's going on with those children. You mentioned behavioral health. Now it doesn't seem far-fetched to say, well, the first population that we should try to get to 100% integration of behavioral health is children. So for myself, I think it would be everything else we do, we should always ask, can we get children's health folks to go first? Ultimately, my own favorite issue is I think the money we're spending on eligibility for children is a waste of money, and we should spend that on something else. And what could we do if the costs of all the eligibility stuff were gotten rid of, and we could use that to do other things for children? Because I don't frankly think that eligibility really brings value. And the other thing is the value-based stuff. So it sounds like the place we could most expect value-based strategies to be tested and to get their, response of the folks who would be affected, would be into it. So that's what.
Right.
I love the way that you've asked us to tee up these further thoughts and questions, and yes, on the deeper dive from my perspective, I was listening to your presentation, I was prioritizing what I think for us would be important additional education, and the first for me came up in the area of the health complexity, and as you were talking about the data that you have available to you and parsing out from a risk stratification standpoint and then looking at disparities across the state, I would love to see that map. I think it would really be an important foundational piece to a lot of the other discussions that you've identified. A second for me was a deeper dive in understanding how you see the metrics alignment. So given what I just said about understanding the baseline around how the state is performing in specific, the health complexity conversation, where you see that information baseline will feed into the measure alignment work in 2020. So how do we know that we're kind of connecting those two dots? And then I think third, and this is just maybe because I'm a visual learner, sometimes I get confused about how all of the pieces fit together in the puzzle. And you've just described a whole bunch of work that I don't yet see the intersections kind of as you're describing these kind of cross-sector collaboration pieces, where the Office of Children's Health plays in profile and in rank, for the other moving parts of the system. And so maybe, not that it's going to be simple, but to think about a visual way that we can look at those circles and lines between the circles to connect them. So those are my top three. Yeah.
I have a couple of comments just to add on to both of yours and then see what else folks have. Thank you. I mean, what you mentioned as priorities and identified are, I think, deeply connected to a lot of the things we've quickly addressed. I think one thing that I wanted to share, Dawn, and for the group is the opportunity that we've had with the health complexity data and being able to pull together system-level data to better define that for our populations of kids have allowed us to pull race and ethnicity data from many different areas such that in the aggregate, when we look at it, we have nearly 98% complete race and ethnicity data when we can show you this. So you've identified some of the challenges we have with Medicaid alone, but when we can apply it and connect it to other data sources, herein lies a critical opportunity and one which we must prioritize and address. So thank you for calling that out.
So kindergarten readiness could be reported for race and ethnicity with a pretty high degree of confidence.
I think we have a lot of tools to leverage. We currently, I will say that the kindergarten readiness data is not one that we've been able to access through the ISC warehouse right now. But yes, I think the point you're making is definitely somewhere we can get to. And all of this work is deeply interconnected. And for example, being able to stratify our other metric data by children's health complexity is an example of where we want to go. And we can certainly work on the visualization of how all these pieces interplay. So thank you for calling this out.
Well, and I really support, John, where you're at in terms of thinking this is kind of the tip of the spear, and what we learn in the children's health space can inform our frustrations with the adults, particularly in the larger, CCO context and conversation about data aggregation and whatnot. We can learn a lot if we've got traction here that we can apply to the larger system. So thank you.
I'm a pediatrician, and this just makes me.
Vibrating.
I know, you can feel me vibrating. I've been trying to be very patient, everybody else talk first, because it just resonates with me on such a level. So, when I look at all this, to me, it's very interconnected. It would be very difficult to pull one piece out when you're taking care of kids and their families, and to be able to say, we're just going to focus on this, because there's so many steps that are involved when you care for a child. And I really appreciated the fact that you said, it's not in here, but I really appreciate the fact that you said children and their families, because you can't take care of a child without taking care of their families. And sometimes the biggest barriers that you have is not the care or services you provide to the child, but the fact that you need to work with the adults and taking care of that child to access those services. And that becomes a challenge when you're taking care of children's health, and sometimes that's the complexity. It's not it's part of the social complexity, is the family situation, not the child itself. So I really appreciate that all of this. I don't know how you can pull one piece out without addressing all this, frankly. But I also am a person who is very practically minded, like how are you actually going to do this? How, from a clinician perspective, how is this going to be done within my space? And I think we do have a lot more tools now, despite, our grumblings about ICD-10. I think ICD-10 actually allows us to be able to identify this in a way that we have not been able to identify previously as far as using billing data. But then, of course, it's training all these people to be able to access, and then places that can't use certain data to be able to figure out how you're going to capture it from those different spheres, like public health. So I'm interested in that piece of it, from a practical standpoint, how are you going to put all these pieces together? Just out of curiosity, if you know off the top of your head, because I remember seeing a report about the kindergarten readiness measures. Do you know what the 2 measures are that are ready to go? Yeah.
I do, yeah. So just briefly, when we're thinking about measurement to drive kindergarten readiness, this is the, I think, typical tension where we have existing validated measures, which are really important, but perhaps not getting at the full context of driving, for example, social emotional development, where there's not existing measures off the shelf that we can pull. So the 2 that do exist already, highly validated, already used in the other places are one, well-child visits for children ages 0 to 3, well-child visits ages 3 to 6 is one of those measures that would be ready to go, and also preventive dental services for ages 1 to 6. So those are the 2 that have been proposed for kind of our immediate opportunity to start driving the needle. And down the road, I could just mention the other 2 that need further work for development. One is a measure on follow-up to developmental screening. So this is, we have an existing screening measure, but we know that many of those kids who are identified as having risk for developmental delay do not get connected to services. So this is actually driving that critical change to actually getting connected to services that are going to improve their health. And then the final one for future development is actually looking at a CCO level measure for driving policy, payment, other practice changes at a CCO level that will ultimately help to inform and improve social and emotional development outcomes for children. Knowing that we can get to a child level measure once those are in place. So those are the 4 that are part of the measurement.
When we talk about, and this ties into sustainable growth as far as cost goes, is that if you can provide this foundation and put children and their families on a road to health, then down the road you're going to save so much money, because we spend so much money not just in the healthcare sector, but in education and criminal justice and public health and all these other areas because of the work that is not done or accomplished or succeeded, whatever word you want to use, in this area. And so I also appreciate, I know you know this too, it's not a 3-year plan, it's not a 5-year plan, it's a 20-year plan. Or if you want to do when the brain matures, a 25-year plan. So I think this is such important work. If I look at these that you've presented, to me, it feels like the one that could function sort of, so to speak, as the umbrella is the children with health complexity, because it is so encompassing. And I think all of these other pieces that you're talking about really fits in that. And so I would love to hear more about this work and what's being done with this work. And how maybe these other pieces, you talked about the visual, how the other pieces like kindergarten readiness and the SHIP and all of this other stuff, value-based payments, would fit under that. It feels like to me that's your umbrella.
So I'm not a pediatrician or a healthcare expert.
What you care about.
What you care about.
I suppose I have a little bit of a different perspective in terms of similar to what Brenda was saying about wanting to see the diagram, but to me, I want to see how it relates, how it trickles down all the way to the community level. Because I think the presentation is really about data and policy, how do we use data to make policy recommendations. But I really think that the data that we collect has to also be, has to come from actual anecdotes and experiences from people, not just sort of analyzing data that's collected, look at race and ethnicity, but really talking to people, talking to members. I want to see how it all trickles all the way down to the grassroots level. And I'm also curious to see where the education department or like the educational system will collaborate with this approach.
Excited to share that.
I have one last, the question about institutional bias in your approach, and as you're building out the work plan, I'm curious how you'll bring visibility to that aspect of the ship and how, I mean, that's a big question, and how to think about parsing it so we can understand what's underneath. Great.
Following up a little bit on what Carla said, I am interested in this, thinking about the long-term gains and how we quantify those to justify today's investment.
Great. Thank you. Can you build that out as we bring that back?
Just ask a side question. I keep seeing things on TV that the birth rate has dropped for the first time in 25 years. Is that true in Oregon?
It's been going down, yeah, steadily. I mean, we used to hold really steady above 45,000 births a year. Now we're closer to 42,000 per year. It is,
That's not just a trend in Oregon or the United States. I mean, that's
it's on the
international.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody saw it. There were a couple of shows on OTV about women's suffrage. And in Oregon passed women's suffrage, I think, in 1912, 6-8 years before the rest of the country. It failed 5 times before it passed. Obviously, male voters in Portland were the main obstacle. In the time period after it passed, childhood mortality dropped significantly because women voters supported a variety of initiatives around children's health. Yeah, 100 years ago, the children didn't have much political capital. And women voting brought them political capital to some degree. But it's just interesting to think how far we have come, but much further.
So is this helpful? Do you need anything?
It just was great.
Sorry.
We will look forward to bringing back a lot of the information you called out and keep on our work plan around this work for your involvement moving ahead. Thank you for your time and
thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming early.
Oh, no problem. Good luck. Put down my first, so next time here.
All right.
So before you do, Jeremy, can I just ask if you're here and would like to submit public comment or testify, please come sign.
Ready?
Ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. All right.
All right, so quick update on the cost priority area, specifically the cost benchmark concept that was talked about in January. In February, I let you know we were working with kind of key legislators that are moving the Senate Bill 419 task force recommendations, Senator Byron, Representative Jost. There was initially a bill introduced, Senate Bill 145, that didn't feel like quite hit the mark in terms of what they initially had wanted drafted. So we worked with the legislative staff, provided some feedback, try to get that point more in the direction of where they're heading. So there's a new bill out there, Senate Bill 889, that just was introduced last week. You've got both a copy of the bill and kind of a one-pager that just gives a high-level overview of the bill. I'll walk through that in just a second. So that bill was just introduced. It's kind of being spread around for stakeholder feedback. Not quite sure yet when it will be scheduled for public hearing. All bills have to be scheduled for a work session, which is basically the opportunity to vote a bill out by March 22nd. They don't have to be out by March 22nd, but at least be scheduled by March 22nd. So we've got a couple more weeks, and I'll definitely keep the board posted. I know that I've shared with those legislators that the board, voted to support the concept and very interested and ready and willing and anxious to help support moving this forward. Let me walk through a little bit of what what Senate Bill 889 does and how it varies a little bit from Senate Bill 145. It basically, similar to the original bill, kind of creates a two-step process where really, the original Senate Bill 419 task force looked at a whole slew of different kind of strategy states were employing to try to contain costs, and ultimately landed at this benchmark program similar to what Massachusetts has. But they didn't really get much beyond that. They sort of said we kind of need another process to really get into details like governance and what type of data is going to be required and how do you actually measure and operationalize these things. So really what Senate Bill 889 does is create the process to get to that next level of an implementation plan for how Oregon can build a statewide cost benchmark. And when I say benchmark, I really mean a cost growth target or inflation target. It would establish a broad stakeholder committee under the Health Policy Board to basically take on that work and make recommendations back up to the policy board. And the reasoning there is one, the fact that the board supports this concept and stands ready to take it forward. But the other piece was, I think some of the discussion, even among the board in January, there's a level of sort of in the weeds detail that need to be worked out. But under the Health Policy Board allows the policy board to make sure that this comes together in a way that fits the overall vision that you will outlay for transformation of the state, and also ties back to other things like quality metric strategy. So one of the things that Senate Bill 419 task force recommended was that we incorporate quality in some type of way, which Massachusetts hasn't quite gotten to yet. So this, having it in the Health Policy Board keeps that connection to the Health Plan Quality Metrics Committee and other sorts of priorities that the board has. So there would be a committee that would be stood up that would work from, probably late summer or the fall, and would have a report due back to the legislature by November of 2020 with basically an implementation plan for kind of all of the details of how this should work in Oregon, and in making recommendations around things like long-term, where should be the governance for this? Is that long-term under the policy board or OHA or new agency or somewhere else? What types of additional data do we need that we don't currently have right now? How should we ultimately set the benchmark in the state? What based off of what sort of economic indicator if the end goal here is to try to make sure healthcare costs aren't outpacing wages in the rest of the economy. So those types of decisions, the bill anticipates would be this committee would grapple with and make recommendations up to the policy board on. So it sort of envisions that there's then a second bill in 2021 that sort of does the full implementation. The current draft of 889 says the board should then implement this in whatever statutory authority it currently has with a bill in 2021 to basically kind of do the full implementation. So it kind of, it's currently drafted, it's kind of like that 1.5-step process as opposed to 2. So that's something that we're going to try to move through with stakeholders and the legislature. That's how they really want this to unfold. But the idea is there's sort of a plan, come back in 2021 for any other statutory changes needed to kind of turn on the program. The other thing that is in 889 that wasn't in the original bill is sort of a framework for what we actually mean by a benchmark program, and this is modeled off of the key attributes that are in Massachusetts. There's a lot of decisions underneath each one of those, but basically provides a little bit more definition of by statewide cost benchmark program. What we mean is there will be a statewide rate of growth target on a per capita basis that will be set, that will be adjusted based off of some economic indicator. It will be measured on a statewide basis, and then also measured at sort of a health plan and entity basis, and that there would be a process where you would have stakeholders come in and do a cost hearing to try to understand what's going on in the healthcare system, or ultimately lead to a report, an annual report on what's, is the state meeting its cost benchmark, and what are the sort of drivers of cost. That's sort of the general framework that Massachusetts has. There's lots of flexibility under each one of those in terms of the decision points. But that's kind of where things are at right now. So still fairly early in the legislative session, but I think the thinking is that by May, when we come back to the next board out after the May area meeting, we should have a pretty good idea of its bill will either be alive or dead at that point, and so we'll have a pretty good idea how things are shaking up or how it's evolved, and that I think will help kind of inform
like I should just always say, John.
John first. I learned that, you know, eating, it's always best to be at the front of the line. In the previous drafts, I had concerns about quality, and I think those are pretty much addressed here. It's clear that that would be a domain that would be of interest. I think that should be the case for equity. You know, I mean, I think we didn't face up to that one at the front end, and we're now trying to catch up. I wonder if in this case, it would be good to put that more clearly at the front end. Because you know, I think in any effort related to costs and controlling costs, you have to be concerned that one way to do that would be to selectively choose one population over another for either cost reduction or coverage, all of those kinds of issues.
My question was related to transparency and sort of both in the committee work, but also through the board, and kind of what threshold will see. It's more of a statement because of the question, but hoping that the process is highly transparent and information will be provided. Looking at cost variation across systems, et cetera.
But, so I think two steps in terms of like this committee that's going to build the implementation plan, that operates like any public body, you know, and all of that process would have to be transparent in public meetings and all of that. And would expect that there would be, you know, some, having worked with, in tandem with the policy board in terms of making sure you guys know kind of set an initial frame and make sure that you're kind of checking in and involved in their work so it's kind of in the right direction. I think longer term in terms of the actual program, the recommendation of the original task force was to actually have more transparency in the Oregon program than what's in Massachusetts, and I'll explain kind of how that works in Massachusetts. So what occurs is there's sort of a kind of a two-step process. Initially, health plans report on using the template that Massachusetts gives them. They report on whether or not they sort of, Massachusetts says, do this calculation and report back to us on whether your per capita costs are above or below the benchmark. And from that, the first step is Massachusetts can identify which plans are above or below the benchmark and which kind of major providers are above or below the benchmark. And from that, they'll identify sort of a short list of, we've identified this small group of entities that appear to be coming in above the benchmark, and then they sort of move that to a second phase of a deeper dive analysis. They go out and actually sit down with those entities, try to request additional data, use the healthcare database and other things to try to understand what's driving costs, and ultimately then decide whether or not, if the costs were above the benchmark, was it basically reasonable or not. And to date, they've not put anybody on a performance plan. In essence, they've said it's all been reasonable, at least for a one-time change. So there's been reasons like, you know, there was a dramatic change in patient population, and suddenly the provider group had a much more, chronic, much higher population with chronic illness or something like that sort of justified a one-time adjustment. But they sort of said, warning, if we see it again next year, we might be doing a performance improvement plan. But generally, all of that process is confidential, and it's not until they actually would put somebody on a performance improvement plan that it would become public. One of the recommendations of the Senate 419 task force was to have more transparency than that. They didn't really say how or what, or is there still a place for sort of confidential information before you get to things being transparent. So I think that's something that this committee will have to really grapple with, is what do we mean by increased transparency and at what level. But I just wanted you to know that's kind of how it works in Massachusetts, and there was definitely a strong signal from the 419 task force, and Bruce can jump in here if I can state any of this, that they didn't really land on what, but they just said we want to be more transparent than that.
Question about the definition of healthcare entities. Are there any groups that are left out of that list that don't do reporting to the state right now?
Yeah, basically the definition that came out needs to be fixed. So I think I can't remember off the top of my head what we found, but the Legislative Council just tried to kind of grab some statutory definitions of healthcare entity, and it doesn't quite.
I was worried about pharma. I wasn't sure how far it's there.
to go back and look at this legislation. But Massachusetts basically sets it at, when they say provider or healthcare entity that's subject to the benchmark, it's sort of large clinics and health systems, so it's only those above, I think it is 15,000 patient, the panel size 15,000 patients and like $25 million in net patient revenue or something. So I think, I think the open question will be, do we get to that level of detail in the bill, or is that something that the committee grapples with of sort of, when we say providers subject to the benchmark, what level do we be? I don't think anybody's, that I've heard is talking about sort of small clinics, but kind of where's the line between?
But what I would encourage is I think that if you don't take into account, and we're talking about particularly geographical inequity, then you're gonna miss a lot of inequity if you don't look at the smaller providers, so. I think trying to figure out how to do that in a way that's not onerous, but helpful.
Yeah, that's a good point.
One of the things we talked about at the retreat that was so helpful in the Massachusetts story was about the level of engagement and all in this, where the opposition was like, oh no, if we're tackling this in one fell swoop, that we think there's problems. Do you anticipate that for us that there will be significant opposition in the legislative process? Or are you, because it's a work group, it's a committee, it doesn't have as much?
Yeah, I think that's what we're trying to kind of suss out. The Senate Bill 419 task force came out with, basically unanimous recommendations minus one legislator, and his concern that he said was basically it wasn't the policy, it was the fact that the group was sort of hospital-centric and didn't include some other partners that really need to be engaged in this. And so, I think that's a strong starting place. I think we're waiting now, we're trying to circulate the bill and get feedback, and we'll go, over the next week or so, kind of where folks are at. But, I think a core principle, the reason the bill sort of lays out a broad stakeholder group is that sort of inclusivity of trying to keep everybody together, because ultimately, I think that's the lesson for Massachusetts, is you've got to have something that kind of works for the entire health system.
One other domain that it didn't address public health, and where public health would fit into this. And, a lot of times the best solution is a public health solution. And I think a lot of times we're wasting money by duplicating efforts that public health is already doing and doing better. Or that in some cases, some problems could be better addressed by public health. So you might think about that. But it seems like their voice should be in here.
Thank you. With should this legislation pass, and wanted to comment on the broad representation, who would be has it been decided, or how will it be decided who will pick this broad representation? Is it, I see this reports to the OHPD, but I just wanted to, where it talks about experts that will be included and representatives in OHA. I just wanted to make sure that the tribes were involved, and also representatives from Eastern Oregon. It seems like we generally up that way. I know that travel is long, but it's just, when there is people gathers.
Yeah, it's a really good call out about the tribes. The kind of initial list of folks was based off of the 419 task force, and it didn't call out tribes specifically. So I'll take all of this feedback as we're trying to work with the legislature on the changes. Right now, the bill has it set as basically, it's a 15-person committee that the governor appoints, and it basically says these are the types of interests that have to be included. So it points to the types of folks, but provides flexibility in terms of what's ultimately.
Some of those folks could bring 2 or 3 knowledge bases of constituencies,
Just to follow up on that, saying this, the kind of implementation committee makeup, I think is important. And I also thought about, like, it doesn't call for that geographic diversity. It also doesn't reimburse expenses, which is gonna make it hard for some of those people. And I also think that the task ahead of this implementation committee is not a small one. And so who is investing their time to be on this intense committee? And how do we make sure that it's not just those who are financially invested in the outcome? So I'm concerned, because I think it does call out a lot of industry people, and that is important, right? Like, this can't move forward without those voices. But those can't be the only voices. And so, like, the health policy board has language around maximum number of people who are receiving their income from the industry or something like that. I feel like there could be some improvements, or the committee could work out fine under this language, but it leaves a lot unsaid, and I'm worried that it's gonna leave some voices out.
Usually things like the makeup of the committee is usually like the most hotly debated part of any bill, so I would expect there'll be a lot of conversation with this. One of the things that we've been doing offline, and I think thinking through kind of the cost agenda or work plan in this is, assuming this bill moves forward in some fashion, ultimately lands as sort of the policy board, that probably doesn't get kicked off till, the fall or sometime, long enough to set up a committee. So I think we've been thinking through between now and the summer, what are the types of things that the board would kind of just help the board get more versed in this type of work. So that would be, I think, what we'd be thinking about for a May work plan that we bring back to you, that would sort of at least show, some agenda items over the summer that would, I think, help the board start to kind of get into this cost area a little bit more. Since the Senate before 18 task force worked on its, or wrapped up its work, 2 states, both Delaware and Rhode Island, have basically passed, their governors have signed executive orders creating benchmark programs. And so we've been able, it gives us now 3 states to look to who are either gone through this process or in the midst of the process. So we've been having conversations with them as well as with their consultants. We're kind of fortunate that Michael Bailey, who's been doing a lot of the work for us, with us around value-based payment, has been the lead consultant with those states for the benchmark program. So we've been able to kind of start to understand the amount of work that went into this and think about, and that will help us start to think about, how do you structure agendas and what's the actual work look like over the next year? Should the kind of
Just thinking about the benchmark and it being an annual increase, I know like the waiver is not a strict annual cap, but now I've heard Pat and OWEB kind of grumble about theirs being annual versus creating a little wiggle room when you can average them over years. Can this make everybody the same? Either one or the other?
Yeah, I think it's got to be shored up in terms of, we've got 3.4% across Medicaid, PEB, and OEB, longer term, and I would think that was something we would grapple with is, are we just talking about spreading 3.4 to everybody initially and then moving to something else, or are we replacing the 3.4 with something else? I think the annual piece is important too. Massachusetts actually set out like a multi-year trajectory and then got to a point of being able to update it. I think changing it on an annual basis is probably not, it's not probably through with sustainability, right? You've got to kind of create a long trajectory. And we know from our experience that there's up years and down years, right? If new hepatitis C drugs hit the market, you suddenly have a new cost in a year you weren't anticipating. So how do you kind of average that out, or how do you kind of take account for that type of stuff over all our trajectories?
Structural question, we're looking at this sort of draft committee diagram and anticipating that what is now a box over off on the left will eventually be a circle reporting into the way it should be as this is currently drafted. And as I heard you describe, the work is between now and the fall, like the fall, so we has formal committee charter, et cetera, out of this, correct?
Yeah, this would have, there would be fiscal on this. There would be some resources needed for the agency staff. So this will, the process is it'll move, if it moves out of the policy committee, it goes down to Ways and Means, doesn't likely pass until later in the session as they're putting the final budget together. So it will be, the summer, probably most likely before we know whether or not this is passed or not passed, which is why I was saying it's probably they're looking at a couple, the fall before you can really get a committee together and on the ground.
So,
Yeah, I'd just like to reinforce a comment that Kirsten made. I don't think it needs to be in the bill, but, I do think something, a commitment that communicates to the public that this board is going to be structured in a way that's fair to the public and to consumers. Some years ago, a federal agency organized a board, and they said there would be consumers on it, and 3 of them were appointed. One of them was a doctor who's not a consumer. Consumer organizations don't identify people like me as them. The other 2 were involved in organizations that had received enormous contributions from funding, enormous. They were all capable. Don't get me wrong, they were all capable. But it was really disappointing to see that happen. And, there's very capable consumers out there who can understand the economics of this, can understand the IT issues, especially at this stage. So it just takes looking for them. And that process might even want to start to think about true consumers who don't have those conflicts of interest. And some people need to be on there who have conflicts of interest, and that's okay. But there should be a process to sort that.
Good feedback. I will keep you all posted as this moves over the next couple weeks. And I know a couple of you said interested potentially in testifying, so we'll let them know when the public hearings come up.
thank you. All right, so I think we're gonna make some adjustments to our agenda. So first, one of you wanted to give us an update on Lakeview, and I know you guys have been getting emails, but I thought this might be a good time to just kind of.
Thanks, Carla. Right, as the board is aware, and as we've been planning for, sent a couple of emails, the board's out-of-area meeting next month is in Lakeview in Lake County, Oregon. There's no commercial airport into Lakeview. There's no commercial airport into Medford Falls. So the closest airport, if you're looking to fly in, would probably be Medford, and then about a 3-hour drive over to the location. We'll offer a tour of the local hospital on the first day, the day before the board meeting, April 1st. And then we'll have the board meeting April 2nd. We've reserved up locker rooms for board members, the Best Western in Lakeview. Please reach out at your convenience to reserve a room. And we'll make sure that there's a dinner for board members as well on April 1st. We've gotten pretty good RSVPs from board members for this out-of-area meeting, so we're really excited about the frontier opportunity to visit a community and see some tours and hear from the community and the local hospital about what healthcare looks like in Lake County.
Great. Second, we're going to move public testimony up. So if anybody wants to sign up. Okay, no takers. Okay. So then we're going to take a break until 10 o'clock, and then we'll reconvene with the legislative update. Thanks.
Cruising along. Chris is here too, so we can do the transformations
said Jeanette's on the phone? Jeanette, are you on the phone?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes. So we're going to move forward with the legislative update.
And Jeanette, it's Jeremy,
Okay, great. And I know,
before you jump in, just so you know,
Sorry.
I've given an update on 2010 and on 889.
awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate that. And just going to do a quick time check. I know you all are a little bit ahead of schedule. How much time do we have for this legislative update?
Until 11 o'clock.
Wow, that's dangerous.
If you can start with how a building comes alive, that way for you.
Oh, great. Does everyone have the graphic I submitted? No. Actually, there's a good video for that. So good morning, and I think my colleague Annalise Dahl, who's really the behavioral health expert on our team, I'm not sure if she's on the line yet. But for folks who haven't met me, I apologize that I'm not able to be there in person. My name is Jeanette Taylor, and I'm on our government relations team. So thank you again for the opportunity to provide you all with an update. I believe Polly gave you all an update last month about OHA's agency bills. So I will provide a high-level update on some of those bills that I've been working on, just to give folks a status update as to what has moved and what we're still waiting on. And then Annalise can provide a little bit more of an update on the behavioral health bill, specifically related to the Oregon State Hospital that she's been working hard on. And then I think I've also been asked to provide an update on highlighting some of the key pharmacy legislation that we're tracking and engaging. So if there's anything else, if you have questions about anything or would like me to touch on anything, please just let me know. So I'm just going to go through the list, and I think you received it last month, but we had a list of, I think 21 agency bills, and so I'll just go through those in sort of or in numerical order. Senate Bill 22 is our behavioral health homes bill. And I won't go into a lot of background on this, presuming that you've got some of the details, but if you have questions, I'm happy to answer. So this bill was referred to Senate Human Services, and we're working to get it scheduled, hopefully in the very near term. This is a bill I know we're really excited about. I think it's been an idea long in the making. There was some legislation that passed a couple of years ago. I think this body was a part of that. Establishing behavioral health homes in statute and encouraging CCOs to contract with them. At that time, that bill did not have any funding attached to it to put together an infrastructure sort of parallel to our patient centered primary care home program that we know has been incredibly successful in driving not only smarter use of preventative and primary care in the state, that's fostering integration and coordination across the system. And so our goal with this is to really get kind of the bare bones infrastructure for a program within OHA. And there's really a lot of work to do, hopefully upon passage of the bill, to establish the criteria for the standards for behavioral health homes. So that is work that we would be hopefully engaging in shortly after session, and that's going to be a multi-month process. As folks know who maybe have tracked the patient-centered primary care home program and how that's developed over time. There are really robust standards around that. And informed by a multitude of stakeholders. So fortunately, there's a great model that we can, learn from and try to replicate, but for the behavioral health, with a behavioral health focus. So that's Senate Bill 22, and the stakeholder vetting that we've done, there's largely, I think, support for this. So the real work, I think, will be upon passage of the bill and trying to figure out what a behavioral health home should be and what that looks like and how we kind of bring those into CCOs, and that was a part of the CCO 2.0 recommendations as well. Senate Bill 23, this is emergency department discharge data. So currently, and for many years, we've been obtaining a suite of data from the hospitals, including, inpatient data. So this is kind of would fill that continuum of data that we receive from the hospital, through the hospital system. And they have been voluntarily reporting this data to us for the last 2 years, and we've been able to establish, build on our partnership with them and come to a place where we've, kind of landed on consensus about how to get authority to and ownership for this data. So that we can be reporting on a number of things that fulfill our policy objectives, and also be able to better respond to grant opportunities, et cetera. So stop me at any time if folks have questions. Actually, I can't see folks in the room right now. I'm going to skip 24, 25, 26, because those are bills that Annalise has been working closely on. And I think also some of the public health bills, Senate Bill 27 and 28, I think folks got some updates on those last time. And one of my other colleagues, Angie Alvey, has been working, who has public health portfolios, has been working those bills. Senate Bill 29, I believe, is up for House for a floor vote today in the Senate, and that's a public health housekeeping bill. So hopefully that is successful on the floor today. Senate Bill 253, the term public health relinquishment, formerly the term that we were using was public health modernization, which folks are probably a little bit more familiar with. So that's another one of the public health bills. And I think, I can't remember exactly if this one is in Ways and Means. I think that's probably where it is currently. And then House Bill 2035, so this is, as another one of our bills, and in the document, actually should say Mental Health Clinical Advisory Group. So I'll just say we have been working closely with the National Association of Mental Illness, the Oregon chapter, otherwise known as NAMI, and they were the proponents of this this group back in 2017. And this is a group that is an advisory body for the Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee, which, as we know, establishes the recommendations for the preferred drug list that services our Medicaid fee-for-service population, including the clinically appropriate prior authorization criteria for that. So the Mental Health Clinical Advisory Group, as I said, was established in 2017. And the focus or the charge for that group was to develop a universe of algorithms that would include to comprehensively and holistically address mental health treatments when there was a mental health drug in department as a part of the treatment protocol. And actually the group sunset at the end of last year. And so needless to say, they have a lot more work to do. And we have certainly seen a lot of value in that group, I think, as the wider community. So OHA wanted to take the initiative to extend the life of this group, ensure that there was adequate staffing resources to foster their work, and have been working arm in arm with the NAMI folks. And so they actually have an identical version of this bill, and that is Senate Bill 138. And because we have been working so well with them, we decided, due to the volume of bills that have been referred to healthcare, which is where this bill went, that we would we can hold off on working Health Bill 2035 and have instead put our energies in Senate Bill 138, which did have a hearing last Monday. And I encourage folks to listen to the archive of that if they're interested. I thought it was pretty compelling testimony by the executive director of the Oregon, or the NAMI chapter of Oregon. And then we also provided some testimony. I think there wasn't too much more to add beyond what Chris Woda had indicated in his testimony. So this should be probably getting a work session soon. I don't think we anticipate an amendment beyond the -1 that was already proposed. We don't anticipate an amendment. And then there was just some clarifying testimony that we need to address, clarifying alignment with some federal algorithms that are in existence. So we're doing that work today, actually, with the stakeholders that raised those issues. Let's see, and then the next few are PEB and OEB bills. I'll just say House Bill 2036. This would have given firefighters and local police agencies the opportunity to opt into the PEB program. I think, long story short, some additional stakeholder work needs to be done that we will be doing in the interim to address, I think, some of the questions raised by these folks. We had done some engagement over the summer, but I think there were some lingering questions, and so we're not pursuing House Bill 2036 further at this time. House Bill 2037, so it's addressing long-term care insurance as an optional benefit offered under both PEB and OEB. This is really just a technical fix to be able to grant those boards discretion so that they can treat long-term care insurance as other optional benefits and have a choice and have that discretion to be able to offer it or not. Right now, it's mandated that the boards offer this type of insurance. And I think, for folks who track long-term care insurance or know someone who maybe has a long-term care insurance policy, these policies have become incredibly expensive over time. And there's some history there, and I don't think the boards have any intention of not offering this type of coverage anytime in the near future, but want to be able to have the discretion to make kind of those smart purchasing decisions for the program. House Bill 2038, so this is a bill that would really just align the PEB and OEB boards. So the public contracting code allows public bodies, lenders, issuing contracts, confidentiality, opportunity for confidentiality under, and Jeremy, maybe you can speak to this a little bit better than I can, but there are certain instances when boards or bodies may need to go into executive session to discuss confidential matters. And so right now, PEB and OEB boards do not have this, the option to do this. And so everything, anytime that there's a quorum reached, those bodies have to have those conversations in public, which can make every part of the conversation in public, which I think can make the process a bit challenging when trying to, when discussing confidential matters and proprietary matters. So this would just try to align the statutes that govern PEB and OEB with the public contracting code. Jeremy, is there anything you would want to add to that?
I mean, I just put a little finer point on, which is that basically PEB and OEB's hands are tied in terms of some of its ability to negotiate with carriers, because basically all conversations sort of have to be in public. They don't have the opportunity to sort of go into executive session and think about reviewing proposals or having a conversation around kind of their strategy in terms of negotiating with the proposals. So other bodies do have that ability when they're working with their contractors or working through procurement, and PEB doesn't. So the idea here is that it would be better, it would be easier for PEB to be able to, if PEB had the same, I guess, opportunity to go into executive session like other bodies do, then that would ultimately help them be able to, frankly, be better stewards of the dollars and be better at being able to negotiate.
Thank you, Jeremy. And I'm going to just take a quick pause. Does anyone have any questions before I'm happy to keep plugging along.
John?
Thank you.
Uh-oh.
This is John Santa. If you could just discuss anything going on around performance measurement and metrics. I mean, you mentioned hospitals earlier on and data that OHA and hospitals are sharing. You know, that's been identified as a gap in terms of the quality measures no longer being public. My understanding is there's been some other discussions about performance metrics, and just for my liaison responsibilities, I'd love to know what's going on, because I don't follow anything in Salem to any significant degree. So anything on performance metrics, I'd appreciate.
Certainly, Dr. Santa, I'd be happy to do that. Why don't I provide that update once I get through the list? There's really one bill that comes to mind, which you may have some awareness of, but so I can certainly address that. Let me plug my way through the list quickly here. So House Bill 2039, that's the dependent eligibility review by PEPA and OEB. So in 2017, Senate Bill 1067 establish a number of requirements to contain costs for the PEPA and OEB programs, including a 3.4% cap. One of the many things that this bill required was actually transferring the responsibility to confirm that dependents that were on a sponsored plan were in fact eligible dependents. So currently, that responsibility through this plan year is retained by the administrative staff within PEB and OEB, and those eligibility reviews are done once every 5 years. Based on experience and history, it shows. I think the rationale for that is that that is an appropriate cadence for those reviews to be conducted as they're diminishing returns when you increase the frequency of conducting those reviews. And so what this particular provision in Senate Bill 1067 did was transfer that responsibility which would really take place this upcoming plan year. So for OS plans, because they fall in line with the school year, beginning in October, September, October, and then for PEP plans beginning January of 2020. So that would have transferred the responsibility for dependent eligibility review to be conducted by the carriers on an annual basis. The costs for not only doing the transfer, for that work to be conducted by the plans, but also with the increased frequency was pretty considerable, and actually would make it, it would be one more factor that would make it challenging for the board to meet their 3.4% target. So this was a bill that the boards were supportive of, that would retain that dependent eligibility review responsibility by the administrative staff within the PEB and OS program. And again, I think for the reasons that I described earlier. House Bill 2040, this bill addresses some of the membership on the Traditional Health Worker Commission, adding a couple of types of representation. So this would add a tribal member, which the commission has black since its inception. It would also add a peer support specialist and a youth support specialist. And then we made a slight modification that the physician member did not have to be represented by the Oregon Medical Association, trying to get some a little bit broader representation since we have struggled to get a physician member consistently on the commission since its inception. So just a couple of things to address the traditional health worker commission membership. House Bill 2265 is really just a housekeeping bill for health policy and analytics. I won't get into the details of that. I think maybe one thing of note for this body is that it does allow the workforce committee to look at data beyond healthcare workforce data that is reported by the board. So for whatever reason, the statute, existing statute seems to be limiting of that, and so this would just allow the workforce committee to look at any relevant and appropriate data to inform their policy decisions and policy recommendations.
And Jeanette, one more piece on that. Actually, it also changes the appointee authority or appointing authority for the health policy and quality metrics committee from the governor to the health policy board. So you'll directly appoint the members of the health and quality metrics committee with the statutory change.
Yes, thank you, Jeremy. And Jeremy did a great job on this one yesterday. So it's actually passed out of the House already, and it had a hearing on the Senate Health Care yesterday, and thanks to Jeremy's compelling testimony, it made its way to the floor, or it will be going to the floor very soon. So hopefully this will be one of the first bills that OHA gets passed.
Some of my best work.
And then.
Sorry, this is John. Did that take care of the oral health thing?
Yeah, that's it.
That took care of the oral health thing? Thank you.
I'm not sure I got the question, but it sounds like it was answered in the room.
Yeah.
I hope, right. 2266 is a placeholder. I don't think we've got grand intentions for that. Jeremy, let me know if I'm wrong. House Bill 2267, this is this was our placeholder bill for CCO 2.0. And the board has, you all made the recommendations, and I think the language that will inevitably be an amendment for this bill is just at least conceptually are the items that you all had reviewed and recommended in the latter part of last year. So I think I'm still waiting on the amendment draft from legislative council, but as soon as we have that, we should hopefully be ready to, have the public hearing and hopefully a work session not too long after that. House Bill 2268 relating to CCO financial regulation. And I'm trying to recall exactly which was the vehicle that was identified. So I'm not sure if it will be this vehicle or another one. There's been a little bit of back and forth. But regardless of that, the idea being that we apply some of the similar tools and appropriate tools to better ensure financial solvency and regulation of CCOs as are applied on the commercial side. So I think we'll defer Director Allen to speak to that, and so I won't elaborate too much unless Jeremy, there's anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've heard Pat talk about this a couple of times. We basically got two CCO related bills. One is the statutory changes that were needed to really implement CCO 2.0. So some of the things like, requiring that local public health and hospitals and CCOs work together on the communal improvement plan. Some of those were really CCO 2.0 specific things are in one bill. This one is, I guess, somewhat related, but sort of came out of some other conversations around sort of some lack of tool or not having parity in terms of the same set of tools in OHA that ACBS does over commercial insurers. This isn't really about sort of applying the insurance code to CCOs as much as it is about making sure that we've got adequate monitoring of financials, that we have the right types of tools to be able to step in if we're seeing a deteriorating financial condition of a CCL, or be able to, take care of those early before things turn catastrophic. And, I think it was eye-opening for Pat to go over to OHA after having had to utilize those tools on the commercial side several times, to realize we actually don't have exactly the same tools built to intervene. And so this would create some parity around some more financial oversight within OHA over CCOs.
That's a great summary, Jeremy. Thank you. And House Bill 2269 relating to healthcare finance, I'll sort of couple that with House Bill 2270, which is raising the price of tobacco and vape products, otherwise known as tobacco tax bill. And so I'll probably turn this back over to you, Jeremy. But I believe House Bill 2269 may be available for one of the parts of the governor's work group and recommendations for the Medicaid budget package. And Jeremy, would you like to speak to
No,
the
I
employer?
touched on this earlier. Yep, I touched on this earlier. So there's the two remaining
Oh, you did.
components of the governor's budget package, which includes a $2 PAC increase on tobacco, as well as an employer participation program that, in essence, would set a spending threshold for employers in terms of healthcare, and they can either provide healthcare directly or contribute to the state. So the two bills that Jen just hit on, 2269 and 2270, are basically the two vehicles for those two components.
Great, thank you. And then before I answer Dr. Sandman's question relating to metrics, I'm going to check to see if Annalise is on, just to touch on some of the behavioral health bills that belong to OHA.
Sure. Hi, this is Annalise Dahl. I'm also the Government Relations team focusing on behavioral health. There are three bills I'll talk about briefly. Senate Bill 24 and 25 are both related to serving aid and assist patients at the state hospital. These are patients otherwise known as 370 patients who've been, who are criminal defendants who've been determined by the court to be lacking in fitness to proceed, so they cannot aid in their own defense. And they are sent, they can be served in the community, or they can be sent to the state hospital for restoration services. This population has been drastically increasing at the state hospital, leading us to be pretty consistently in violation of a federal court order that says that we have to admit all of these patients within 7 days. So we started working last fall with a large group of stakeholders to try and come up with some fixes to this issue. And by fixes, I mean ways that we can ensure that individuals are either diverted from the criminal justice system, or if we have skilled, we are advocates that they have to be restored to ensure that we can restore as many people as possible in the community, unless they need hospital level of care. A really large portion of the individuals served at the state hospital have only been accused of misdemeanors, and we actually even have quite a few, just for one area in particular, who've only been accused of municipal violations, so like Keenan Street, garbage, littering. So the idea is to this large extent possible to service those in the community. And so Senate Bill 24 has a little bit larger policy fixes, ensuring that there's collaboration with the community mental health program, ensuring that for misdemeanors and municipal violators, if they're sent to the state hospital, there has to be a specific finding that the court makes that they need that hospital level of care. Forensic evaluation efficiency is Senate Bill 25. This one is much more procedural in nature. It involves not just the 370s, but the 365, which are individuals who are sent to the state hospital or evaluated in the community again for that initial determination, whether they have fitness to proceed. It's a number of things that just seem common sense almost to ensure that we can file our reports electronically, to ensure that the orders are transmitted to the hospital within 1 business day. We continually see clients who have been sitting in jail sometimes for over a month, and the order was for some reason never transmitted to the state hospital. So that's Senate Bill 24 and Senate Bill 25. Senate Bill 26 involves, Senate Bill 24 and Senate Bill 25 are the Senate Judiciary, and those are being heard next Monday. Senate Bill 25, or Senate Bill 26, excuse me, makes clear that if an individual has a substantiated case of physical or sexual abuse, an employee at the state hospital has a case of substantiated physical or sexual abuse against a patient, this makes it clear that it is the public policy of the state of Oregon that that person can be terminated. This comes from a number of cases in which abuse has been substantiated, and upon further review and appeal, upon further review and appeal, that is turned over, and they have to be reinstated to the hospital. Sorry, I apologize for barking dog. Those are the 3 Oregon State Hospital bills. Should I talk about housing now, or do you want to take some other questions before we talk about housing? Yeah, why don't I answer Dr. Bennett's question on any bills related to metrics, and then we can, I think there was an ask to talk about housing, and I'll highlight the pharmacy bills. So the only bill that I think has really caught our attention so far is Senate Bill 735, and this bill had a hearing in Senate Healthcare yesterday. So the introduced version that folks will see online on the Oregon Legislative Information site, otherwise referred to as OLIS. This is consistent with, I think, a number of other bills. It doesn't actually exactly reflect, I think, what the intentions and the goals are for this bill. And this has been evolving a little bit. There is a small work group that Senator Steiner Hayward has convened that includes OHA, some of the insurers, the hospitals, as well as the chair of the Health Plan Quality Methods Committee, Dr. Kristen Dillon. And so that bill, as we understand it, I believe the intention is to grant the Health Plan Quality Metrics Committee the authority to be able to establish a core set of metrics within the existing set. I believe there's currently 51 measures. So to establish a core set of measures that could then be applied to all plans across a number of markets in the state. So right now, CCOs have their incentive measures that 17 of them, 18 of them, I think, overlap in part with the health plan quality metrics. There's alignment on the PABINOA side as well, the codify, the requirement of the court that to be applied to PABINOA, as well as the commercial insurers. So there's going to be a follow-up meeting later this week to clarify, again, the intent and to kind of figure out how to get there. OHA is just providing technical assistance at this point, and we do not have a position on that bill, but we are there for technical support. So that's really the one bill that comes to mind. And Jeremy, I don't know if you'd like to add more to that. And Dr. Bennett, I don't know if you or others have additional questions.
Well, I'll just say that on its face, I think we generally are supportive of trying to get alignment around metrics, no doubt there. I think there's been a bunch of conversations about this bill offline that we're trying to get caught up on, including conversations around trying to, add more to the Health Plan Quality Metrics Committee around sort of hospital metrics and things of that nature. So at this point, we're just trying to kind of get caught up in some of these conversations and providing full assistance to the center staff, or she's thinking about where this bill goes from there.
I mean, my sense is if the universe is still at planned quality metrics, and adding some language that would, I don't know, get commercial carriers through our plans to cooperate, that would be terrific and would be kind of in the corridors that they've been in. If hospital metrics get added, then that's a different universe. That's not plans anymore, it's hospitals. And I mean, they pointed out there's this gap, but you know, that's a different order. It requires a different set of political capital, if you will. So, you know, it's all good, but if that committee's scope is expanded to hospitals, then there's work to be done.
And Dr. Santa, I'll just add, I think we absolutely share that understanding and so have, again, at least from the technical standpoint, begun to identify some of those questions and concerns, and hopefully this work group will help to, you know, both clarify the scope, intent, and then also address some of the implementation considerations and the hospital association. I mean, they are a part of these discussions, so you know, I think it's, we will update you as this evolves, so hopefully by next month, so there'll be more to share here.
Yeah, but you know, the other group that's not in their scope now, but metrics come to them, is for clinics. And that's yet another and really huge universe. But to kind of get back to the cost discussion that we had earlier, once you start making comments about costs and you want more granularity, you know, folks will want granularity in terms of plan, hospitals, and clinician groups. And, you know, in the 51 measures that HPQMC has approved is the total cost of care measure. So there's a cost measure in there already, which is relevant, you know, in the distance, on the horizon for these other activities.
I mean, the other component of this, and this, again, we're trying to kind of navigate where this conversation is going, but, you know, you hit on a little bit is sort of, how does that interplay with value-based payment? How do you try to align, you know, value-based payment efforts? So I think that's a large conversation and one that we'll be engaged in over the next, you know, several years, of trying to figure out how do we kind of align metrics in the right spots, and how does that feed into value-based payment? How does it feed into total cost of care? So just, you know, a lot of conversations happening in all of those spaces that we're trying to figure out how to kind of bring together.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Annalise to talk about housing. And there's a ton of pharmacy bills, so that maybe is easier to go over in the next month. And apologies if I spent too much time on our ADIS bills.
All right, well, I'll be brief on housing. As I think a lot of you know, housing is permanent supportive housing in particular is something we fund through the Oregon Health Authority, and we're hoping as we move forward with increased focus on social determinants of health to do more in that area. So I'm going to focus on what is kind of the biggest deal for us as an agency, which is more budget related. And then if folks have particular questions about particular bills, because I think that there was kind of like some interest in housing, we can talk about those too. So the big news, yay, exciting thing, the governor's proposed budget includes 500 new units of permanent supportive housing funded through OHA and the Oregon Housing and Community Services Agency. This is incredibly exciting and much larger scale than we had anticipated leading up to the governor's budget. So I want to take just a minute to kind of explain what needs to happen in order to get these units on the ground. Sometimes I think we forget on the bricks and mortar side just how far back you have to go to start the planning. So there's a really, and I'll start by saying that there's a really strong push from the governor to, even though these are in the governor's budget, and that means that we don't actually have the funding for these units yet, there's a really strong desire to get at least the first 200 units on the ground by the end of the 1921 biennium. And so that means that the work for these really has to start now, even before the funding is allocated and the bond is passed and all these kinds of things. So, so there's a lot of work being done already on this. So from the bricks and mortar side, clear, these are new units. These, it is not for renovation of existing units. And kind of unscientifically, what we're seeing in our current permanent supportive housing program, which we fund about 1,100 units across the state for individuals with severe and persistent mental illness, and then about 500 units for individuals with substance use disorder. And what we're really seeing now is that, and these are tenant-based vouchers, I can talk a little bit more about, but what we're seeing with this is what's really holding us back from ensuring that every individual does have housing is a supply issue. that is really what's holding us back. It's not that we don't have people, it's not that we don't have services, it's really a supply issue. And we also have funding to renovate, so we're doing that there, but we really need more units on the ground, so that really supports the governor's proposal. So the actual bricks and mortar will be funded through bonds, through housing and community services. But even in advance of the sale of those bonds, we really have to set up the partnerships with the developers and the service providers. And so $50 million is going to housing and community services, and then just about 6 months of funding for the biennium is coming to OHA to fund because they won't be on board until then. If the funding comes to OHA for the rental assistance and for the housing support and services, and that's really kind of a wraparound services in addition to any other services individuals might be getting. And we also do barrier removal for individuals, which means if someone can't come up with a security deposit or they owe money to the utility company or anything like that, it's removing these barriers to get them to housing. So, all that said, in order to get these first 200 units on the ground in the next biennium, really by summer, the offering has to kind of already be out there. And I bring that up because we have a lot of big thinkers who have a lot of CPOs who are excited to come to the table on permanent supported housing. And some of those partnerships are probably going to have to wait until future rounds just because of where we are in our CPO contracting process. That said, there is a lot of excitement in the community. There are a number of nonprofit developers already out there, like nobody comes to the table. We have to decide in the coming weeks really what our focus areas, if you will be for the permanent supported housing. These are going to have to be project-based, which means that instead of a tenant getting a voucher, for instance, that these units themselves will have the rental assistance and the support tied to the actual unit. So they will probably be projects that will be 100% people who are subsidized housing to meet some sort of housing determinant that we will determine in that program. So there's kind of a lot of unknowns out there on that one right now, so we could go pretty broad. There's a really broad list of that really goes as far as anyone who's at risk of homelessness. Or we could kind of tighten that up a little bit. But this first round will probably be a lot more loose than it will be as we move forward. So that's really exciting. So, and I will mention one more thing that the Oregon Housing and Community Services Agency recently released their housing plan. It's a 5-year plan that they have done in the past, but this one is considerably more robust than previous ones. OHA assisted in the development of that plan, and one of those key priorities is permanent supportive housing. So we'll put that out there, and then I will pause if there's any questions about that or about particular housing bills that are maybe a little bit broader that are moving through the session.
So we have about 5 minutes. You guys have any questions? Okay.
I don't have any questions about housing, but I did have a question about something before we moved into housing, but we could probably stay in housing until we're ready to wrap up.
So did you hear that? So, Oscar, do you want to ask? Why don't
Sure.
we have you ask your question?
Sure. I have a question about just where Representative Greenlake's push to end the non-medical exemptions to vaccines is right now. Do you know?
That's the they had, you want to go through that?
Nope.
So they had a public hearing last week. It was pretty full, but I think that is moving forward with the work section this week. Isn't that correct, Jeanette?
That is my understanding. I wasn't, I believe that's true. I believe that's true. I need to double check. That's 3063, is it?
I can check right now.
I guess my follow-up question to that would be more maybe geared towards Jeremy and Carla, wondering if it would be appropriate for us to signal some type of support at the board, or, maybe it's supposed to be visual, but kind of, if there's an opportunity for us to communicate or signal some type of support for that.
I'm trying to remember because I know I don't remember if it was the last time this issue came up. Did we send a letter?
I don't recall, and we haven't had, really discussion about the.
Jeff said we did.
They did it, the board usually doesn't get involved in specific legislation,
Yeah.
but this
I
is
think we
specific
did.
legislation 3 years ago, we did.
And just so you know, Patrick Allen and Dr. Harganani were both there testifying on the issue last week.
So is it worthwhile for us to pull that letter out and see if it's something that can be updated and?
Sure.
Would that be okay with the board if we sent that out? You guys look at it and then provide feedback? Or?
I mean, if one of our priorities is going to be children's health moving forward, I think that this is connected to that.
Yeah. John?
Yeah, I was on the HB 4005 work group on drugs. We don't have time to discuss drugs today. And I'm not sure we should take it up while the legislature's in session, frankly, because it's so complex. But if we do, the one issue that is bothersome to me, because it relates to transparency, is rebates. And, I know the federal government has said, let's get rid of them. They're causing more problems than they're solving. It worries me a little bit. Normally, I would think, well, Deb should have the ability to negotiate in private. Well, my guess is they want to negotiate rebates. I don't know, but, that rebate issue is a big one, and it's messy, and it's a tricky issue.
We would agree with you that it's a big issue and it's messy. It's a complete mess, to be honest. The PEP piece is really has nothing to do with rebates. I mean, it's really.
Well, that'd be good.
It's really the opportunity for the PEP board to be able to come together, review rate proposals, they negotiate rates every year
Yeah.
with, and it's not to say that shouldn't be, there's a transparency that's important in that process. It's just that normally when you go through a negotiation with any contractor in the state, you have a window where you can have, confidential conversations as the state is trying to, get the best deal that they can. So it's really not specific to group
Good.
All right, unless there's any other questions for the government relations team, sounds like you guys are staying very, very busy, and we appreciate your good work. I think we'll move on to Chris. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Take care.
Right on time.
I would be first So hi everybody, I'm Chris Demars. I'm the director of the Transformation Center. So today I'm going to be giving you an overview of the Transformation Center's work over the past 5 years until now, talking about the primary care payment reform collaborative that we convened, looking forward to our work for CCO 2.0, and then have a few questions for the board. So starting out with the Transformation Center's work, and I want to point out that you all have, there's a 2-pager about the Transformation Center in your packet, the materials as well. And these slides kind of drill down into that. All right, I'll just trust that I'm on the right slide and not always look back. So the Transformation Center was launched in 2013 with the goal of supporting innovation within Oregon's health system. Our mission is to serve as a hub for innovation and quality improvement for Oregon's health system reform efforts. And our goal is to identify, strategically support, and share innovation at 3 levels: the system, the practice, and the community level. This graphic shows a broad range of topics for which the Transformation Center provides support. They include population health, social determinants of health and health equity, health-related services, and those are kind of grouped together. A lot of support around the CCO incentive metrics, primary care, behavioral health integration, oral health integration, and value-based payment. I'll be giving examples of some of our work in these areas in the coming slides. So the Transformation Center's work is divided into 3 focus areas. The first is that we provide capacity building in support of the innovative work that CCOs, but also, and mostly CCOs, but also providers and the community partners do. And that's broken down into two approaches. One is multi-partner learning, and the other is one-on-one support. So I'll be talking more about that in coming slides. The second focus of our work is the patient-centered primary care home program. And the third is our system and policy innovation work. So the Transformation Center's capacity building work has been really the kind of where the Transformation Center started over 5 years ago. And we've built a capacity for CCOs and their partners through over 450 what we call supportive activities. These include 200 multi-partner learning, peer learning opportunities, and over 250 episodes of kind of individual one-on-one project-based technical assistance. The multi-partner learning activities include learning collaboratives, multi-CCO trainings, and events on a smaller scale to some events with hundreds of people. And the one-on-one supports primarily include individual TA technical assistance and subject matter expert to provide support and expertise, and also CCO-specific trainings. Over 11,000 people have participated in the Transformation Center's activities over the last 5+ years. And our evaluation data of post-support shows that 90% of the participants find the support to be valuable, and 99% said that they would take some sort of action as a result of that support, be it reaching out to colleagues and community partners for more information, making new relationships, or improving processes within their organization. So examples of our multi-partner or peer-to-peer learning supports include annual convening of the Community Advisory Councils. This is part of a broader Community Advisory Council Learning Collaborative. Through this annual event, CAC members learn from each other, and one of the main focuses of our CAC convenings over the last few years has been recruiting, retaining, and engaging members on the CACs. We also host an annual event called an Innovation Cafe, which brings CCOs and partners together to share their innovative strategies around a certain topic area. This year's Innovation Cafe is happening on June 5th, and it's focused on the social determinants of health. Last year's focused on children's health. This last fall, we have hosted a peer-to-peer learning event on health equity, hosted out in partnership with the Office of Equity and Inclusion. And our Transformation Center staff have supported an effort called the Regional Behavioral Health Collaborative, which is a metro area partnership developing an action plan to improve behavioral health outcomes. This slide gives some examples of our one-on-one supports. Once again, around behavioral health, we posted behavioral health integration technical assistance program over the last few years, and all but one CCO has requested and received technical assistance through this program. Topics have included helping CCOs identify behavioral health metrics to assess outcomes or integrating behavioral health into pediatric care. We've also provided a huge amount of support around to the CCOs to help them achieve their goals for the CCO incentive metrics. We're currently providing support in 8 of the CCO incentive metrics that you see on this slide. This support involves a whole range of activities, including one-on-one consultations. We have to host webinars, online resources, and trainings. Now, at the bottom of the slide, you'll see some of the impacts of this metric support. So, for example, we held a pretty robust colorectal cancer screening metric TA program over the past few years. All CCOs increased their rate of screening over the following year after this program was held. We don't know, of course, if that was directly attributable to the Transformation Center's support, but we did hear in the post-technical assistance evaluation surveys that CCOs found our assistance to be invaluable. For example, one said that they didn't think they would have been able to go in this direction and implement the kind of make the changes about the TA from the Transformation Center.
Chris, just out of curiosity, you say we and we. Who is the we? Like, do you have a staff that goes out and does this? Or are you working?
Great question.
Are you working with community partners who?
So for the metrics technical assistance, and for most of our technical assistance, we do pair the CCOs up with outside consultants, outside experts. We have something called a technical assistance bank, which is a bank of consultants that don't have, that are kind of on a, gone through a procurement process and are accessible to provide support to CCOs and their partners. And then the last point I was going to talk about here is just our immunization technical assistance program. A few years ago, one CCO increased its immunization rate by 14 percentage points. They started out being the lowest in the state and increased by that much in 1 year, and attributed that to the TA they received from the Transformation Center. Dr. McCully, I'll also just kind of add to that, though, there are instances where the Transformation Center staff also provide support. And when it comes to the immunization TA program, there was a Transformation Center staff person who has some expertise and kind of has worked with CCOs in conjunction with some outside experts. So this slide just has some quotes from the evaluations that we've received over around the capacity building support. We've continually received positive written feedback about the values the CCOs and others find in this work. They appreciate hearing about successes from other organizations. They appreciate the technical support they receive from outside consultants, and they tell us they would like us to continue to convene them so they can learn from each other. So now shifting gears to the second kind of bucket or area of the Transformation Center's work, the Patient-Centered Primary Care Home Program. So PCPCHs, as I think you all know, are practices that meet the highest standards of quality care. And currently there are 655 patient-centered primary care homes. The PCPCH program staff recognize PCPCHs. They visit clinics on site to review performance and provide guidance. And they offer technical assistance for clinic improvement. For example, site visit staff provide coaching for clinics up to 6 months after a site visit has occurred.
The PCPCH model has been shown to decrease costs and increase quality. There was a PSU, Florida State University, conducted an evaluation in 2016 that found $240 million in savings to Oregon's health system between 2012 and 2014 as a result of the PCPCH program. And PCPCH has also performed better than non-PCH clinics on many clinical quality metrics such as diabetes A1C and diabetes and adolescent well care visits, and also diabetes IAs. This map shows the location of the 655 PCPCHs. Clinics are categorized in 5 tiers of recognition. So to be recognized within a specific tier, the clinics need to meet a certain number of standards or measures. In 2017, the program moved from 3 tiers to 5. Most of the PCPCHs were in that 3rd tier, so the decision was made by Standards Advisory Committee, which I'll talk about in the next slide, to move it to 5 tiers to kind of raise the bar, if you will. 52 of the 655 PCPCHs are what's called 5-star, which is the highest tier. It distinguishes exemplary clinics that have implemented advanced transformative processes into their workflow. And to be designated a 5-star PCPCH, clinics must meet 11 of 13 advanced PCPCH measures and then also receive a verification site visit. Some of the measures they need to meet are on that list of 13, and they, like I said, they have to meet 11, are being open for extended hours beyond the usual 8 to 5 to improve access for patients, using clinic data to implement quality improvement projects, and translating written materials into all languages spoken by more than 30 households or 5% of the practice's patient population. The site visit surveys, the site visitors, upon completion of the site visit, send a survey to the clinic, and the results of those are extremely positive. We see 2 quotes from those surveys on the right-hand side of the slide, noting that the site visitor is a game-changing process with the support that's provided, and clinic in the second quote expresses excitement about continuing to improve, sharing that with OHA staff, and wanting to be a resource for other clinics. So every few years, the PCPCH program convenes what's called the Standards Advisory Committee, which is a multi-stakeholder committee that provides policy and technical assistance to OHA on how to advance, on refining the model to advance primary care transformation. We're convening the Standards Advisory Committee in July of this year, and it will meet for 6 months. Topics for consideration to either be included in the model or kind of modified as part of the model include oral health, social determinants of health, health equity, substance use disorders, and a list of clinical quality metrics that PCPCHs report on. And the intent of that is to align those quality metrics with other statewide metrics efforts happening across the state. Any recommendations that the Standards Advisory Committee makes would be implemented in mid-2020. So now I'm moving to the 3rd body or 3rd focus area of the Transformation Center's work, and it's our system and policy innovation work. And this is work that the Transformation Center has taken on over the past few years. It's a little more recent. The Transformation Center is engaged in system level and policy support in the areas you see on this slide related to CCO 2.0 over the past year and beyond. These areas are value-based payment and primary, and with a specific focus, but not exclusive at all to primary care payment reform, social determinants of health and health-related services, behavioral health integration, and oral health policy. And just to point out, the value-based payment area and social determinants of health and health equity, the Transformation Center played a lead role in those areas for CCO 2.0. Also not on this slide, but related to our system and policy work, is the Transformation Center the lead for reviewing CCO's transformation-related deliverables, such as the community health assessments, community health improvement plans, and the transformation of quality strategy that each CCO needs to develop and submit to OHA, which used to be called the Transformation Plan. Now this slide shows where the Transformation Center sits within the Oregon Health Authority. We're within the Health Policy and Analytics Division under Jeremy, and the Office of Delivery Systems Innovation, which Dr. Dana Harganani runs. We currently have 16 staff in addition to me. There are 2 managers. One is the Patient Center Primary Care Home Manager, and she has 6 staff members, and then a Systems Innovation Manager, and she has 9 staff members. If I can just pause there, we're going to be shifting gears now to the Primary Care Payment Reform Collaborative and see if you have any questions about the Transformation Center's work up to this point. So now shifting gears, the Primary Care Payment Reform Collaborative. The Transformation Center manages this multi-stakeholder collaborative that was required by Senate Bill 231, passed in 2015, and it was the expectations were modified through Senate Bill 934, passed in 2017. The collaborative's tasked with helping OHA develop and implement what's called in the legislation a Primary Care Transformation Initiative that has 3 goals. The first is to increase investment in primary care without increasing cost to consumers or the total cost of care. The second is to improve reimbursement methods. That's the language in the legislation. How to interpret that is moving toward value-based payment away from fee-for-service. And the third is aligning primary care reimbursement across all purchasers of care. The collaborative includes 46 members representing organizations such as primary care, or entities such as primary care providers, health plans, CCOs, behavioral health providers, patients, and other stakeholders, and these categories are identified in the legislation. And the collaborative has convened at least quarterly since 2016. And just to give you an example of how much work that has gone into the collaborative's put into this, we met 33 times in 2018 through work group meetings or full collaborative meetings. So in January, the end of January of this year, the collaborative finalized its annual primary care, the first per Senate Bill 934, Primary Care Transformation Initiative report. And this was submitted both to the Oregon Health Policy Board and the Oregon Legislature per legislative requirement as well. And it includes recommendations to support advancement in primary care payment reform. And I'll note that all collaborative members signed on to these recommendations. It was very exciting. So the recommendations are kind of fall into 3 areas. The first is that the collaborative recommends 2 complementary payment models. The first being a primary care payment model, the second a primary care behavioral health integration payment model be adopted across the state. The primary care payment model aligns with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services program called Comprehensive Primary Care Plus, or CPC Plus. I think some of, if not all of you, are familiar with this model. I'm happy to answer more questions, but in summary, or the bottom line, the high level, is that it is a federal primary care payment model that 18 regions across the country, Oregon being one of the regions, are participating in, and it requires that commercial payers and Medicaid partner with Medicare to adopt this payment model. So the model that the Primary Care Payment Reform Collaborative adopted is based on this model, but spreads the model to all payers in Oregon and all providers in Oregon. Federally qualified health centers, pediatric practices, and rural health clinics were not eligible to participate in CPC Plus, so it would extend the model to those practices. And then not all payers voluntarily are participating in CPC Plus, so it would extend the model to all those payers as well. The proposal laid out in the recommendations is the model would be phased in over a 3-year period to different types of clinics. And the recommendations also include value-based payment targets that for all payers to meet over that period. And these targets are complementary to the CCO 2.0 value-based payment targets. The second, as I just said, is the payment model that supports primary care and behavioral health integration. You kind of think of this as a subsection of the subcomponent of the primary care payment model approved by the collaborative. The behavioral health integration model would address contract contracting issues, billing issues, and sustainable payment. There are specific recommendations to get to each of those goals. The second component of the recommendations is to develop a statewide infrastructure to support implementation of these payment models. So that would include the following three kind of types of support. So first would be payer and provider technical assistance in this value-based payment model adoption. The second is monitoring payers and providers in their adoption of the model, including reporting mechanisms and the eligibility of practices to actually participate in the model. And the third is overseeing an evaluation of the implementation of the models. And then the third component of the recommendations is basically the report lays out requests to different stakeholder groups to ensure progress is achieved in this primary care transformation initiative and in implementing the models. So for example, all payers and providers are asked to implement and report on the payment model strategies that are outlined in the report. The request of the Oregon legislature is to support the development of the statewide infrastructure with sustainable funding, to support a framework that would support the spread of value-based payments while avoiding codifying the details of the collaborative payment models in legislation. And then there's also a technical fix to Senate Bill 934, which would support the adoption of widespread value-based payments across all Oregon payers. And 934 limits that only to the CPC plus payers. And so that kind of aligns 934 with collaborative's recommendations that I alluded to earlier. There are also requests of all contracting entities, OHA, and the Department of Consumer and Business Services. So that's a primary care payment reform collaborative. I'll pause there before moving to the Transformation Center's work, moving forward in case anyone has questions about that. That's definitely different from, or a little more, it's focused compared to the broad presentation on Transformation Center I'll be going into next.
This feels like a seismic shift. Is it a seismic shift?
For primary care payment?
Yeah.
It is, yes, I would say it is. I mean, the CPC Plus program is substantive. It is the majority of payers in the state. It's 155, I think, practices in the state. But we estimate that there are in the 800 to 900, practices in the state. So yes, it would be many more providers would be kind of folded into the value-based payment. This kind of CPC Plus-like model. I'll also though mention that with the CCO 2.0 expectations around value-based payment, to meet those targets, it's anticipated that at least for the CCO population, and CCOs, they would start to kind of expand their value-based payments around primary care as well. In addition, we've been in conversations with PEB and OEB around expanding value-based payment within PEB and OEB. PEB and OEB sit at this primary care, the collaborative table as well. And so I guess I would just say this movement toward value-based payment is around primary care is aligned with other efforts happening.
I mean, the seismic shift happening is that the Transformation Center, where it has always been designed to try to be spreading across markets, but had been very Medicaid focused, CCO focused initially. And I think as we're getting to CCO 2.0, is quickly, rapidly having to shift into really multi-market collaboration, which I think is exactly where we need to be, but is stretching our capacity and boundaries at the same time. But I think this is the first time we've really had a collaborative, I think of this nature, with this much buy-in on value-based payment across this many markets and payers and clinics. And I think we're very rapidly going, from where the policy board landed with this 2.0 recommendations, very quickly, rapidly going to trying to figure out how to align that across multi-markets. One's through the primary care collaborative, the other's through PEB and OEB have now jumped on board and said, we're going to set the same exact targets over the next 5 years for their plans. And I think, so I'd say that's kind of the seismic shift happening here, is more of, our scope and needing to be successful. The 2.0 recommendations really require us to be looking across all these markets, and kudos to Chris's team for building it there on a major component of that, which is primary care.
Well, I'll ask my question now. I mean, I think this is an incredible and robust body of work. But like Carla, you know, this is seismic. And my concern is, can 18 people do this? I'm sure there's more than 18. You know, this is a war that's going to go on because this is now about money. And I can tell you from, you know, so there's probably 2,000-3,000 primary care clinicians out there involved in this. And it's, again, it's robust. But you gotta, you know, this is kind of like, I see this as a blockbuster drug. It is a blockbuster drug. And I'm skeptical that we're not treating it like a generic.
There's no rebates going to the transformation center.
I know that. It's too bad. You know, I just see it as a really big deal. And
I think it's a very big deal too.
And, you know, if it's going to be done well, there's going to be a lot of resources touching 600 plus organizations all around Oregon. And there's got to be a bunch of really skeptical, you know, early adopters. I mean, you've done great with early adopters, but now you're moving into mainstream folks. And it is difficult to get these folks to move.
I'll just say that we, you know, a lot of the governor's budget was very generous in terms of proposing funding a number of areas of adding capacity, particularly in the transformation center. And always came in around social insurance and health. We are anticipating this is just an area where we're going to need to really increase our technical assistance. But we're not going to be able to do it alone. There's no way that we would be able to provide or should provide all the technical assistance. And so I think it's trying to find that right balance of what can we do in the transformation center, what can we do collectively with all of the other partners out there who I think are trying to figure out their own role in all of this, and there's more than enough work to go around for everybody.
And you know, I mean, I think there needs to be a piece communicating what's going on to the public. Because the folks who oppose this are going to go to the public and say, these primary care doctors can't do what you need. We've seen it before. And, you know, I've had the occasion to go to many websites of primary care folks recently. And, you know, their websites kind of look more Marcus Welby than, you know, transformational. And only a few of them mention we're changing the world and we're tier 5. And, you know, really in many respects, you need a campaign to convince the public that this value-based stuff, you know, there's been stuff about the public's very skeptical of that word. And it's like, wait a minute, you know, what do you mean value-based? It sounds like you're taking money from somebody and maybe it's me. So I think it's seismic, and I would be worried these folks can only do so much. Maybe there's enough to just do it for children.
You know, I think the work that has been done around the PCPCH really lends, I mean, what you've learned from that, the lessons and stuff, I can really see where that applies in this area too. Because I think one of the things about PCPCH is that you really did start with these early adopters who then were able, through word of mouth, but also sharing through learning collaboratives and stuff, really show other clinics that you can do this. And then, like you said, when the site visit come on board, they really are learning opportunities so that people can see the successes that they're having and build on them. And I can see where that kind of approach could be utilized somewhat in this change in the payment system too. So I think building on that reputation that has been developed from PCPCH could be very useful here.
Yeah, no, that all of this feedback is really helpful and very much in line with where we're anticipating going in terms of the technical assistance and the infrastructure that's needed. We know OHA can't do this alone. PCPCH program being within the Transformation Center to PCPCH staff, help staff the collaborative. And so, you know, we're kind of thinking through the next steps of all of this. Something I didn't mention is the collaborative exists per statute until 2027, and that's really exciting. We have enough time, we hope, to be able to, really make this change and do it right. We just recently launched our new work groups for the collaborative around things like technical assistance and implementing the models. There's a meeting this afternoon. So I feel very hopeful. I think the fact that all collaborative members signed on to this, I didn't even mention, there are even 2 organizations that aren't collaborative members that also want to sign on. So we added them, it's great. That it says a lot about the willingness to kind of stick not just toes but whole feet in the water and kind of make this change. And it's been a very, very positive experience, this collaborative. It's been great. So I commend all the participants and their willingness to work together.
Oh, I just wondered, are the tribes involved in this collaborative? And where does the IHS clinics and the tribal clinics and, I don't know so much the urban clinics, on Portland, but where are we?
So the tribes are not involved in the collaborative, but you bring up a good point. I'm gonna reach out to OHA's tribal director and see if there might be an interest in having tribal participation. I will say that with regard to value-based payment more broadly, I and others have gone to the OHA tribal meetings and talked about value-based payment. And then I know that there's a new, relatively new analyst within who works under the OHA tribal director, who has a real understanding, and I talked to him recently about value-based payment and having the tribes kind of as part of that. The way tribal clinics are paid for is in many ways, and I'm no expert on this, so I don't want to misspeak here, but in many ways is more robust than what we're talking about with value-based payments. There may not be the incentive, but I'm gonna stop my comments there because I don't want to say anything that is off base there. But that's a great question. And around the collaborative, it might be we could at least have a conversation with Julie Johnson and see if there might be interest in having tribal representation.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just add, one of the things we heard from tribes on CCO 2.0, right now about tribal members in the state, about half are in fee for service or outside of CCOs and about half are in. And that just varies depending on part of the state and, the relationship between the tribe and the CCO and, what their different health programs look like. Well, one of the things that tribes brought up in our consultation, which I think is something that we really need to dig into a little bit more as we're thinking about our future work, is for those that aren't part of the CCO or don't contract with the CCO, how do we make sure that as we're trying to move towards value-based payment, that actually creates more opportunities for providers, that they don't get left behind because they aren't part of the CCO system. And so, I don't think we really wrapped our heads around exactly how that would work, but I think it's a really good thing that we need to keep our eye on, that there's things that we could be doing on the fee-for-service side that also helps give tribal clinics more flexibility in terms of how they use dollars, for instance. And we want to broadly, have value-based payments that help other tribes as well. So it's the first thing.
This kind of brings up the issue. There's a budget that isn't in here, and that's the budget for political capital. And because this is going to need political capital, in my open nose work, it comes down to political capital. Is a chief medical officer willing to do this rather than something else? And the more political capital can be built that supports this by the governor, by legislators, by the OMA, by the hospital association, by folks on the private side, because you are talking about moving this into commercial. And CPC Plus is Medicare, right?
It's Medicare, Medicaid.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it will need substantial political capital.
So I'll just note that Dr. Dana Hargani attended a number of collaborative meetings and playing that role. So.
It's going to be.
Yeah.
But I mean, it made me feel good looking at all these primary care websites. These doctors look like me. They don't look like me. You look like Dana. But some other folks who,
But you're Marcus Welby, you said they were Marcus Welby, and you look like Marcus Welby.
yeah, that's a problem. But yeah, you gotta marshal that political capital, and really Dana will do that, but she'll need help.
Okay, anything more on the collaborative? So, looking forward, so looking to the future in CCO 2.0, the Transformation Center plans to provide a full range of capacity building supports to CCOs, providers, community partners, tribes, and others to achieve the CCO 2.0 goals. So first, a significant amount of our support, as I kind of have already been alluding to, will be around value-based payment. This support will include technical assistance to CCOs in adopting their value-based payment models, monitoring and reporting on CCOs' progress in achieving their value-based payment targets, and then, as we already alluded to as well, aligning the CCO 2.0 work with other payers' adoption of value-based payments such as OEB and PEP, which has already begun. The Transformation Center also plans to support CCO 2.0 implementation in areas of social determinants of health and behavioral health. So for social determinants of health, our support will likely fall or will fall in 4 areas you see on the slide here. The first is around the CCOs, the expectation of CCOs spending on social determinants of health. This includes developing and managing the capacity building fund and spreading cross-sector social determinants of health innovations. We also plan to provide support, and we've already been in this space for a few years, but continue to support increased adoption of health-related services by the CCOs. That's obviously very closely aligned with social determinants of health spending. We plan to continue to support community advisory councils, and we'll focus on the enhanced roles that they're expected to play under CCO 2.0, and then also continue to support CCO development of their community health assessments and community health improvement plans, the alignment between the CHIPS and health-related services spending and other partners' community health improvement plans, and all of these being anticipated under CCO 2.0, so kind of helping make those connections and providing that support. Around behavioral health, we plan to provide technical assistance in a whole host of areas related to 2.0, such as integrating behavioral health in primary care, trauma-informed care, access for children, and supporting development of a diverse workforce. And then finally, and I mean very much on a related note to everything I just said, but in terms of the how, we do plan to continue to convene kind of about those multi-partner peer learning opportunities in all of these areas and more. And we also just kind of plan to start that off in probably March 2020 with CCO 2.0 launch event. We're excited about. And then lastly, I just wanted to let you know about something that we just launched in the past end of January. And it's a new newsletter that we entitled Transformation in Action. And we developed this in response to requests that we received from CCOs last year to help tell their stories around the innovative work that they are doing. This will be a quarterly newsletter, and the goal of sharing innovations between CCOs, but obviously lots of other audiences too, including you all, legislature, etc. So the first issue was that you see a screenshot of here. It was focused on CCO examples of tobacco cessation work and the work in supporting community health workers, or community health worker programs. Every issue is going to focus on 1 or 2 transformational topics. And so the issues that we've identified over the next year, next 3 issues are maternal and child health, social determinants of health, behavioral health integration, and the metric that's focused on emergency department use for individuals with severe and persistent mental illness. So with that, I now have 2 questions for feedback from you all. So the first is around the CCO 2.0 launch event. And I would just like to get from you all, from your perspective, what topic or topics should be prioritized at this event? And do you have any other input for this event or any other kind of convenings that we plan to host that's related to CCO 2.0? I'll stop there before going into the second question.
So it feels like to me the two big pieces in CCO 2.0 that may be beneficial to spotlight is social determinants of health, but also traditional healthcare workers. I think in some areas that they use the traditional healthcare workers more, but I think there's a lot of areas where they're not even sure who that is and what they do and what role they can play. And I think there's a lot of questions about that, like who's going to hire them, who's going to pay them, liability issues. I think there's just a lot of questions around that. So I think that, to me, I think those are the two hot topics that it's helpful. Thank you. John?
Yeah, well, I'm an evidence guy, so I think you should have your evidence all together, because there's going to be folks who will say there's no evidence that any of the things you're talking about work. I think there is evidence that you've got to present it. I was at a recent OAH committee meeting, and they were going through an informal process with the committee members as they went through various topics. And when they came to PCPCH and asked what folks thought, 6 of the 7 folks did not think there was an adequate evidence base. The 7th had read the PSU report. 6 hadn't. And, this is always a struggle, because I didn't read it until actually one of the positions involved in PCPCH sent it. So I would be ready with a very convincing, as much as possible, evidence-based defense of where PCPCH and all this going.
Thank you. When I read the question in our board packet prep for today, I was thinking about the tool that you all helped us develop in planning 2.0 that helps identify where there's like easy lift and that's not going to take much in 2.0, but the other ones that are going to take a lot of discretionary energy to remove. Those would be the ones that I would focus a launch around, because there's so much material to cover. The most questions that people are going to have are going to be the ones that feel most new and unfamiliar. And then I think my other input would be reminding that there's a long trajectory to some of this activity. I think whenever I attend those sorts of things, I'm like, okay, what do we need to do tomorrow? And there may be that energy in the room as well, but some of these efforts are simply going to take time to lay track. And so how people access the transformation or other resources to learn along with the transformation itself, it's just constantly reinforcing that message.
Yeah. Chris, I know I get to provide this feedback outside of this, but I'm just thinking this, I mean, I think to John's point around political capital, Brendan's point about the trajectory, it feels like one of the greatest things we get out of this launch is trying to get clear on what does CCS need to be successful, what kind of supports do they need, how do they need to think about the technical assistance, bank, and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think particularly, just thanks for that, just how OHA can also recognize its strengths and weaknesses in support of the evolution and say, this is what we're building toward. We know we've been short-staffed in this area, this is what we're doing about it.
Actually, we're kind of new gaps analysis, what do we actually have capacity to do it in-house versus where we need to find other partners.
Yeah, and coming forward with, we acknowledge our gaps.
I guess similar to that maybe is, I know that the CCOs in general, there's an expectation that part of the global budget will be towards investments in social determinants of health. I would just be very curious to have, how does that translate to tangible investments?
Do you mean like specific examples? Like if we.
Yeah, what is the sort of like the
guidance?
innovative thinking around
Okay.
how to use those investments?
Okay.
What would be the transformation?
area that it has really made a difference in some of the people and the acceptability that they feel that they're getting when they go to our clinic to get services. And I think that it's got to the point where they do can, you know, the traditional healthcare workers that we have, that they can get paid, you know, through Medicaid and so forth, because they're considered in that area. And also I know at the Health Equity Committee, we did talk somewhat about the social determinants of health, but we didn't get too much into it. But I had hoped that we would talk about it a little bit more, but I think that could be, we probably should get into that. And I think that in that, I think that housing and all those things that go into the social determinants of health. And I know that just yesterday when I was in Bloomberg and I was leaving, I got word that we had a fairly newborn tribal baby that was no longer with us. And the FBI are investigating what happened, you know. And, you know, there's nothing that we can do until the FBI and autopsy and all that take place with the medical examiner. And it's, you know, being that it's a reservation that, you know, we don't have a whole lot of people there. And so when we lose one, you know, and especially a child, and that there's all these, we don't know what happened, you know, but I think, you know, the social determinants that go into place in some of our families, that I think that's important, you know, how we raise our children and even get to children's health. You know, if we're losing newborns and, you know, where do you, we're talking children's health, you know, there's that whole thing that you have to address even before just children's health. So it's just such a whole big picture. I really think that the social determinants are.
All right, and the second question is focused on the PCPCH Standards Advisory Committee. So, as I mentioned before, they're gonna, when they convene in July, they'll consider revising or adding to the model measures on oral health integration, social determinants of health, health equity, substance use disorders. Given the committee's limited time together, are there any of these topics that you'd like for them to prioritize? And how would you like to be kept apprised of the committee's work?
So I think it's really important that it meshes with the CCO requirements. What I will, disclosure, I'm a site visitor for the PCPCH. And the stress that small clinics feel to meet these metrics is huge. And so as you can continue to add these layers of things that are more complicated, like oral health integration and substance use disorders, I think it really, I don't know if you can have a level playing field when you look at sizes of clinics. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind as you're doing PCPCH, that whatever the measures are that you're putting in place are achievable by clinics of all sizes, whether that's 1 to 2 providers or, you know, 10 to 15 or greater than 15. I think it's really, really important to think about it from that perspective. And overall, I think small clinics do a good job, but they are stretched to meet some of the requirements. And so I really want to encourage the advisory committee to keep that in mind.
I was wondering just about the assessment process for the standards committee, you know, to have a baseline understanding of what levels of, you know, oral health integration is an easy one, like what levels actually exist, to then know how to set point and stretch. You know, and I would say that across all the domains, and not included here is the oral health integration, but to me it falls in the same, you know, family around what is the universe of possibility and how would we begin to think about putting layers and levels into those kinds of questions. So for what's a baseline understanding and yeah, I don't know how targets are set.
think some of these things can be measured without having to go to the level of the individual provider collecting the data. Because I think the ability to do that is stretched as it is. But I think there are ways to measure at least some of these without asking them to somehow do something on every patient, to fill out some data element and include it on their claim or whatever. And I think it would be good to try and figure that out. Public health is keeping track of what's going on in communities. I think sometimes it might be just fine to have a population measure. So that individual clinicians don't have to worry about measurement. I think, Carla, like hoping the EHR is going to help with this is still a ways off. I mean, that's pretty messy too, because the EHR companies are not very easy to work with, especially for smaller groups.
Right.
But you know, if you don't measure, you can't improve it. If you don't standardize, you don't improve it. So it seems we should be able to figure this out without a ridiculous burden of work on individual.
I will say standardization's easier in the one provider.
Anything else? That's all very, very helpful. Thank you. So last slide here just has our website. You can go there for sign up for the Transformation National newsletter, upcoming events, resources, innovation, and then that's our generic email. And you can go and get my email. I probably should have mine there too. But so with that, thank you very much. I appreciate your interest in the Transformation Center.
But Chris, just amazing work to your team.
Oh, thank you.
And Transformation Center is a good title for you guys to work with. That you guys really does appear to be transformative. So.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
All right, so unless there's any other comments, or we will adjourn 10 minutes early.
And we'll see each other in Lakeview.
Lakeview next month, yes.